Good evening. Welcome to the Town Council meeting of February 11th, 2019. If I could ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so public participation. Looks like we have one person, Kristen Barrett. Do you want to come on up to the microphone? And I just want to let you know, though, just in general, the little paragraph we read here. Sit down. If any members of the general public wish to address the town council, they will need to sign in prior to the town meeting, which you did. The total amount of time allotted shall be 15 minutes, no more than 3 minutes per person. So just state your name, and we're not going to have a back and forth conversation, but just name and address and tell us what you want.
Hello everyone, I'm Kristen Barrett. Some of you know me, Tony Longo, Paul, hi. So I live at 263 Albion Street. I'm a mother of 3 students. 2 go to the high school and 1's in college. And I'm here on behalf of the initiative to I'm just going to read what I wrote because I know I only have 3 minutes.
Sure,
so rather than kind of stumble along.
That's fine.
I'd like to take an initiative for proper safety measures to be taken at dangerous intersections at Hemlock Road, Nahant, and Farm Street. Our town's youngest and least experienced drivers are all converging there 2 times a day to get to and from Wakefield High School and the Voc. In addition to student drivers, there is heavy traffic from commuters heading towards Saugus and Melrose. I'm proposing an immediate resolution for police officers to direct traffic there from 7 to 7:30 in the morning and 2 to 2:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, which was the case years ago, I am told, by long-term Wakefield residents. There is already a police presence at Wakefield High School, but not to direct traffic. If the town can afford to pay for police detail at construction sites, we can afford to pay for the safety of our student drivers and pedestrians trying to enter and exit the schools. There were 4 head-on collisions there last year alone, I was told by a police officer of Wakefield. As a long-term solution, I'm proposing installation of much-needed traffic lights, which will then eliminate the need for police officers to risk their safety at these intersections. Depending on the outcome of this, I may be prompted to circulate a petition and/or organize a student sit-in, which I really don't want to do, but this is what it's come down to.
Thank you.
Are there any
Thank
questions?
you very much.
Yeah.
It's not a back and forth, but I'm talking anyway. So we had discussed this
Great.
really recently, and as someone who went to Wakefield High School and I remember the officer standing at the circle, I think an officer out there makes a tremendous amount of sense. I got a taste of the traffic myself. Because my son drives himself, and I had to drop something off, and it's crazy, especially with the cars going to
It's a free-for-all.
Route 1.
Yeah.
So we hear you. We've actually talked about it a few meetings ago. We suggested to a traffic committee that we want that looked at carefully. You know, I don't know if lights make sense. Lights may not make sense because of the flow of traffic at some point, but something has to be done. So we are definitely talking about it.
That's good news.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, though, for
right.
bringing it to our attention.
Sure. Thank you all.
Thank you. What's that?
Start off with police.
Okay.
Because they're here.
Right.
No, he's here too.
So for the presentation action items, we're going to jump to the police since they're in attendance. I
So
wanna
is fire.
Where's fire?
Chief, look right behind
Oh, he's hiding behind Kristen. I'm sorry. I'm
Fire's
sorry. I
always
didn't see
here.
I didn't see him.
Go to police.
But
There's
since
more
we have
to
more police, we're going to bring the police up first.
They outvoted you 2-1.
You're 2-1, right? And so Lieutenant Scory, Chief Smith, and Kevin, you're welcome to come up first, actually, and together. What's that? Oh, I know. Okay, so for the fiscal year 2020 budget, number 1 is number 17 on the budget, fire. I'm sorry. Let's move it on to 16 again. So number 3 is number 16 for the police. Sorry about that. We'll get back to you, Chief Sullivan, in a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Town Council members. First budget tonight is the Police Department budget. We have Chief Smith here. We are recommending an increase of $187,608 over the fiscal 19 budget. This breaks down under personal services. The increase is $162,108. We increase the overtime line items $30,000 to better reflect current and prior year expenditures. The balance of $132,108 is for contractual negotiated increases. Under contractual services, the increase is $25,500. We increase 3 line items. We increase the training line item $7,000, and that's for new additional training for the police department. We increase the telephone line item $3,500 based on current year expenditures, and we increase the unclassified line item $15,000, and that's to cover half the cost of a recovery coach that we are working with the health department with the grant that they are trying to obtain. That will be for $15,000. So the total cost of the recovery coach for next year would be $30,000. Under materials and supplies, we are level funded. The total budget request is $5,899,868. And with that, we have Chief Smith here to answer any specific questions you may have.
Questions, comments? Tony?
First of all, Chief, thank you for the job that you and your officers do every day on behalf of the town of Wakefield. I had the opportunity over this past summer to go on a ride-along with one of your officers, and I learned a lot on what the day-to-day what your officers see. You're not just stopping bank robberies and house break-ins. There's so much other. There's such a social aspect to what a police officer does today. And in talking with the officer I went along with, the domestic issues that you face, your officers face every day is unbelievable. But I know we talked earlier today, so tell me a little bit about your narking costs and where they're headed to. I know they've gone up substantially.
Sure. First of all, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that, and the members of the department appreciate that, Mr. Longo. But I will say the cost of Narcan is doubled. It's gone from around $30, $35 a dosage unit. It's up in the 70s now, plus or minus. We have to remember that this is a marketing deal. It's a pharmaceuticals. It has nothing to do with anybody, certainly in this room. So we're stuck with it. So when we buy Narcan, we buy it at the current rate, and we buy it off the state. We buy it from the state, or we work with the DA's office, or we work with whoever we have to get in order to purchase the right amount of Narcan. Having said that, I will say that Narcan is the end of the line. When we deploy Narcan, that's a last-ditch effort, and it has no longer than an 18-month shelf life. So when we buy Narcan, we have to try to, it's basically like working in a dairy department at a grocery store. You have to rotate your stock. You have to make sure that it does have, the shelf life is not expired for whatever reason. And, it becomes it's an issue. It's a stocking issue. It's a restocking issue. But I can't say it enough that although our deployments of Narcan have changed since 2015, 2016, the price has doubled. I'm a firm believer that unfortunately Narcan is the last of many issues and problems to get to where we are. Is it a lifesaver? There's no question it saves lives. Do we use a lot of it? Unfortunately, we use a fair amount of it, and what we're finding now is that in 2015, 16, when the opioid epidemic, as known back then because of OxyContin and other opiates, that's changed. We were delivering one dosage unit usually at each overdose we went to. Now it's taking us 3 and 4 dosage units to revive those who have overdosed. So the dynamics have changed. It's a moving target.
A quick question, and I'll end with this. Approximately how many doses are you going through on a weekly basis?
Just throwing me a curveball. Now or then?
Now, just in
Well, I can
2018.
tell you, using this year's numbers, 2019, we've had 10 calls for overdoses. We've used 4 deployments of Narcan.
Thank you.
Now, bear in mind that, and I want to, actually, I'm glad you asked that, Mr. Longo, because it's not only the usage of Narcan, but it's where we're using the Narcan and where we're getting the calls for that end of the line deployment. This year, since January 1st, it's the middle of February, we've had 10 deployments. Doing the math, it's 120 overdoses I shouldn't say that, 60 overdoses if we go along those and we project it out. 4 administrations of Narcan. 4 of them were in motor vehicles. 4 of them were in residence. 1 was in a restaurant, and 1 was actually in a police station. So the message is that it's not happening in the doorway. It's not happening in remote areas. It's happening in our homes. It's happening in our restaurants. It's happening in the police station. We're seeing a change in the dynamics since 2015 and 16 when we get into this. So, but you know, we're averaging right now. Basically, it's every other time we go out, and that's changed because when we get into this, unfortunately, when we were pushed into this business because of the opioid overdose issues we were having, it was basically OxyContin back then. Now it's Suboxone, it's heroin, it's everything that you can buy in a grocery store, in a pharmacy, that people are overdosing on. They're just taking too much of it. They're self-medicating, and we're getting called into it. Biggest problem we're having right now is fentanyl, and we're seeing that it's not just heroin. The big piece is fentanyl. We're having people that are overdosing on fentanyl alone. That's changed the dynamic very much, and that's why we're seeing more overdoses, but less fatalities.
Thank you, Chief.
Paul?
Thank you. Chief, thank
Yes,
you for sitting here and answering our questions. I'll echo Tony's comments. Force does a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Based upon, what we put out there for them every day, and they step to the plate as always. So kudos to your department and to yourself on doing this.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm gonna stick on the same topic, Narcan use. So you mentioned that you had 10
This year.
this year.
Yep.
How many did you have since January 1st, 18 to now? Roughly.
To now?
Yeah, just ballpark. I know you're a man of numbers, so when I say ballpark, you'll probably give me
Math wasn't my
exact.
strong subject in
Well,
school.
there you
That's why I
go.
became a cop.
So,
We had 61 from January, we had 61 overdose calls in 2018. Add another 10, we've had 71 overdose calls. Last year, 7 of those were fatal. So far this year, we have no fatals.
thank you. And of the 61, how many needed Narcan?
Bear with me.
Okay,
34 doses
34 doses.
by us. Now, Narcan was also deployed by family members, some by the Wakefield Fire Department and some by Action Ambulance.
Okay, so,
And I don't have those numbers, but I can tell you we did 34 dosage units.
so typically, an officer finds someone OD'd and they're hitting them with the Narcan. What is the procedure for that individual at that point after they are revived, let's say?
Up until last year, they could get up and tell us to take a hike and they could leave.
What is
Now, thanks to the governor's bill that was passed last year, we can mandate they go to the hospital. We can mandate they go to the emergency room.
But they can deny treatment, though.
They can do, yes,
At that
they
point.
can deny treatment.
So that the next day, hypothetically, could there be another time where you're going to be sending your officers out there to possibly giving that individual more Narcan?
We could be back in an hour.
Okay.
And we've had that happen, where someone has overdosed, we revived them with Narcan, and we've been back in an hour to revive them again.
So my question to you, do you feel that we, as a community, could do something one step further instead of just hitting them with the Narcan and just having nowhere to go to or to anyone to talk to at that point, long-term? Would you support something like a support group like AA, but have it for NA, narcotics, or the opiates? I mean, we have.
Funny you brought that up.
Hold on a second. I looked at the names throughout. Wakefield has none. Lynn has a ton of them. Malden
Yep.
has a ton of them.
Yep.
They're all over the surrounding areas. But our citizens, the people living in Wakefield, aren't going to go there to get the help. They don't have the means to get there, for one, probably. Okay? So how are we going to do a service to the public that you're serving, that we're serving? How are we going to do one step further? Can we get a support group by some organization to be based out of Wakefield, to give them that one extra level instead of them going back and doing it all over again? At least to have somebody to talk to?
Let me start from the beginning, and I'll bring you forward to where you want to be to answer your question.
Thank you.
In Wakefield, we have, and I'm quite proud of this, and the men and women of the police department are quite proud of it. We've embarked on, since we're the portal to the social service system in this country, like every police department is, we have enacted with the Board of Health, because this is a public health issue, a number of educational pieces. We work with the schools, our SROs do awareness programs in the schools. We have recently hired a recovery coach that Mr. Gill just talked about. A recovery coach will work with the victim and the families. I shouldn't say the victim, but the victim. And will work with the families. Prior to that, when we go to an overdose, the next day, we send officers out. We send a family resource officer out. If she's not available, we send the detectives out. And the mission is not to look for criminal prosecution. The focus of that is to make them and the families aware of what services are available. Now, unfortunately, like many suburban communities, we don't have a
Wakefield.
program from and after. I would like to see, as someone who's very familiar with what's going on here and working with different agencies around, I would like to see a partnership with this community and maybe with the help of our faith-based community to try to put something together supported by grants that would allow us to have the opportunity to refer them to a self-help, like a AA type program for narcotic addiction. We, like I said to Mr. Longo, when we're administering Narcan, we've failed, okay? We haven't been able to do enough prevention to prevent that person from overdosing. And so if we get to that point, we're gonna save their life today, but there's no guarantee we're gonna save their life tomorrow. So with a recovery coach helping them out, with our officers going out and distributing literature, talking to the families, seeing if we can get the family to support getting them into a program, the next logical step is to have that program on deck so that they can look at it. So Mr. Donaco, I fully support that next step. And I think that because this is a public health issue, not only in Wakefield, but everywhere in this country, it's time that we partnered, and more so than we are already, but partner with our public health department. We have some wonderful people over there that are working really hard, and move forward down the grant road to see that if we could possibly fund through grants the next step to keep those who are addicted to whatever they may be addicted to, because there's all kinds of drugs out there, make sure that they have the resource available. Can they say no? Absolutely. You're consenting adults, they can say no. But I think if we offer that to them, we've done due diligence as a community.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Ed,
Chief, just a couple questions picking up on what you had mentioned. The state has clearly made this epidemic a top priority. I think it's pretty clear. You hear the administration talking about it currently, and and there are resources that appear to be dedicated to it. What efforts are we making, and what efforts can we be making to try to take better advantage of any state grants, state money that might be available to supplement or fund either current services or other programs that you think would create a more holistic approach here, which it sounds like what you're trying to target. It sounds like the Narcan is the end result, but how, if we can rewind 5 steps before, what can we be doing those 5 steps so that you're not using the Narcan? Do you guys have those resources? How do we go about doing that? How do we go about getting more grant money, and how do we go about getting more state funds in whatever variety so that we can support these efforts?
Mr. Nabolsky, I could talk about this all night, but I know the chief's here and he wants to get out of here. But going forward, and I said this is a public health issue, we partner through Wake Up and other groups in town with the health department. The state will not give a grant for any type of drug program to any one city or town unless you're one of the 7 core cities. You've got the Holyoke, you've got Springfield, you've got Lowell, you got Lawrence, Haverhill, all those to Boston, Cambridge. So what we're stuck with in our environment is either to do a regional approach, like they're doing down in Plymouth County, or partner with the health department and do that on a regional approach. So my suggestion is, and we've had great success so far with the health department, to bring them on board and try to do it like with Tri-City Mental Health. We work with them. We're working right now with the Medford people from Tri-City. So we're trying to get that done and also bring in our mental health providers, because a lot of this is a mental health issue. So tapping into the state coffers individually as a town of Wakefield is difficult unless we show a strong and committed partnership with our Board of Health, which we have, and other boards of health and police departments in the area. In Plymouth County, the DA down there has done an incredible job of bringing all the departments together under the guise of the leadership of Plymouth PD. And they've been able to gather a number of grants from different places. We don't have a grant writer. And, I don't have the expertise to write grants. So that's why I think we should be partnering more so with our other entities around the town and in the area, the greater areas, the Stonehams, the Reddings, the Melrose.
And have there been discussions, because I know, for example, Mr. Mayo has done a good job of collaborating with neighboring communities for shared services and the like. Have there been those sorts of discussions? And if not, how do we get that dialogue going so that we do have a more regionalized but shared community approach to this, so we can open ourselves up to those opportunities?
We've been working with the DA's office, with Middlesex DA's office. We are part of the task force that meets on Thursdays down in Medford. We've taken the lead from there, and we're part of the Tri-City Mental Health Group, and that's where one of our grants is going to be coming from. We've received some money from them as well as other providers, because we're incorporated with Medford, Everett, Melrose, Malden, Stoneham, Wakefield, Reading. I'm missing somebody. You get the picture.
Right.
So, that's where we're going to be able to ascertain grant monies, because it's a regional approach. And, so far we've been doing okay with that. But we're not, when you deal with these grants, we're a small community like Reading and Stoneham and Melrose, and you're dealing with basically a brain drain of Malden, Medford, Everett, the bigger communities that have, larger problems. So, we get our piece, we can get our piece, but it's not gonna be the chunk that I would like, that's for sure. So, I think what we're doing now and working hand in hand, Catherine has been great over at at the health department, as Ruth has been. So to answer your question, it's a kind of a long way around your question. We're doing that, and we're doing the best we can for a community of our size. What I don't want to see is a spike in the numbers so we get more money. I'd rather see the numbers drop and we get nothing, but, that's just the way it works. In fact, we're going to be, the health department, I think it's next week, are going to be meeting in Medford to talk about the Chelsea initiative and how they're doing it over there. They're sending some of their staff out, some of their community staff, as well as a captain from the police department are going to come over, and we're going to, the Tri-City, we're all going to be talking about that.
Thank you.
Mary?
And then me.
Thank you, Chief, for coming and talking about this. I want to say, I do this for a living. I know Julie works at a women's shelter as well, and so this is, we've both been trained on Narcan, have both administered it. It is not easy to do, and so thank you for you and your team for all that you do. I think, thank you for coming and actually talking about this, because I think as a community, that's actually where we all have a value at, is actually talking about this. Narcan is the end solution, and there's so much to get there, and I was joking with Paul that he actually wrote down what I was gonna say, and he got to say it first, but you came up with some great solutions, and I hope you know that we as a council are a partner. We're not looking for you to single-handedly solve this, but I'm putting the burden on us to look for those grants and do some grant writing and talk to the faith-based communities and talk about getting some support groups. We don't have any support groups in town for any sort of addiction services, which I think is really distressing, because to repeat the number you said, there were 61 calls in 2018 and 7 fatalities in Wakefield. It's not the numbers of bigger city, but that every single one of those is actually really alarming. And so and we have a great board of health. Wake Up is a great organization, but I'm putting the challenge out there that we should do more, and giving funding for the recovery coach, easy for us to do. And I'm really looking forward to hearing in a year from now how great the recovery coach has done, that position, and see if we can use more. But I'm really putting the burden on us to actually think about some creative ways to fund some of these other things other than Narcan. That's not the only solution, and this public health crisis it's nowhere over. We have not solved it.
Yeah, exactly. And where we see the change in the drugs, we're seeing a change just from, we're getting away from the elephant in the room, the OxyContin, and we're seeing, like I said, we're seeing heroin, we're seeing fentanyl, we're seeing Suboxone, now we're seeing methamphetamine. It's just, all this stuff just keeps flying at us, and everybody, and rightfully so, is saying, how are you gonna solve this? And it's a bigger problem than just enforcement or just Narcan. It's a social problem, it's a public health epidemic, and the only way we're gonna put a stop to it, or at least slow it down, is by building relationships and partnerships with our faith-based community here, the leaders of the community, and the people out there that we're serving. We need to bring them together and get everybody on board, because like anything that law enforcement does, prevention is the key. And when we get to Narcan, the prevention piece is falling apart. And there are the cases where somebody overdoses for whatever reason, first or second time, we get that, but the people that we keep getting called back to really need to be part of that prevention piece. And it starts here, and it starts with our young kids.
And adults, right? I mean, I think Wake Up in the schools are doing a great job, but it's not an 18 and under problem.
Well,
I bet if I asked you about the ages of folks, they're probably mostly adults.
Exactly right.
All the way.
25-year-old group all the way up into their 60s.
Yeah.
And that's very telling of how deep this problem is in our country today.
Yeah.
It's just not the 18 to 25-year-old group. It's everybody from and after that, and that's what we're seeing. When you read a death notice in the paper, it's very easy to see, or at least surmise, what that person passed away from. And you look at the ages, and it's telling, it's shocking. And when you see somebody your age that overdosed and died, so it's a problem. But again, we're having the support of this board and working forward hopefully we'll be able to rein it in the best we can in Wakefield, and that's our priority right now.
Yeah.
Quickly, Chief. Thank you. As always, I love the fact that we have so much money going to educational incentives for the police. You know, I've always believed in a well-educated police force stops a lot of problems. And that's why I think we don't have it, and from the leadership on down. You talking about where these overdoses are happening is also critical, because I think some people in Wakefield might want to blame the benches and the people walking around downtown for all of it. It's your neighbor. It's happening next door. It's happening within your family. And that's what, more than, you know, some folks with mental health illnesses that we also have within our community. So I think it's really important, the approach you're taking. I know that members of the Board of Health went to Washington, D.C. not too long ago, really talking about this issue, and with Tri-City Health, it's been around for years. When I was a DA, we used their services. Mystic Valley has some regional, so I think it's really important for us to tap into that. You're starting it, and I take up Maureen's call. I know we have AA meetings in town. We should
Right.
have an NA meeting. So, you know, looking into something like that. So thank you very much for everything.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Julie?
I just have and thank you, police. I echo everything everybody, our chief, I echo everything everybody has said. I'm just wondering on the recovery coach, so that's a full-time position for Wakefield? Is that a dedicated person for Wakefield?
It's gonna be halftime.
It's only half-time?
Yeah.
So the
And the
30,000
reason-
that's coming from a combination of the health department and the police department is
Right
the
now,
part-time.
we're
Okay.
looking to bring another community on as a partner with
Okay.
about the same volume of, activity that we have, just to take the sting out of it a little bit. You know, it's $30,000 and, it's a lot of money in my book. So, you know, we're looking for another partner. We have one that wants to partner with us, but it's budget season, you know, everybody's moving everything around, but I think we'll be able to wrap that up very soon.
And will that person be housed in our public safety building?
Well, right now, she's kind of a nomad. We don't have any room in the building, but she's working with us, so, right, she's working over,
We had a discussion earlier.
I had to get that paid political
It's another
announcement in there.
discussion, right?
Right now, she's working with the Board of Health, and
Okay.
she'll be sharing a desk or space next to Catherine up in the Board of Health for now. But that doesn't mean that she won't be using, you know, our facility if, her goal is to meet in a place that's comfortable. And sometimes, most of the time, the police station isn't the most comfortable place to meet, for people who are having trouble with drug addiction. So we've made arrangements, and we have a plan where she can go and meet, whether it's in the court, or whether it's on the street, whether it's in the church, or in her office in Town Hall.
And do we have similar services for calls you get on domestic violence? 'Cause I'm sure you see your fair share of those as well. How
Do
are-
we, I'm sorry?
On domestic violence calls, or people who need help dealing with abusive relationships? Or do we have a similar, I know the recovery coaches for substance abuse, do we have similar services to refer people to get out of dangerous situations like that?
Yes, we work hand in glove with Respond. We have, through a grant, we have a young woman who actually comes in one day a week and works in the department. When Amy Rando is out of her office, she takes over the office, and she works out of there doing the follow-ups with the victims, making sure that any victims of abuse are directed to court if that's one of the alternatives, making sure that they're made aware of the services. And we all know that many times the victim doesn't want to leave or doesn't want the services because it's a financial problem. They're going to lose their children, they're going to lose their housing, they're going to lose their income. And that's problematic. So working with her from Respond, she's able to direct them and then advocate for them. We can't advocate, you know, we can't take the court, we prosecute the abuser, but using her services, we're able to have the victim go to court with an advocate.
Great.
So they're in good hands.
I'm glad to know that we have that
Yeah,
service.
yeah.
Thank you.
And she's very good. She'll come in, she'll help us out. She's very good.
Great.
We're fortunate to have her.
Ed?
Just two things unrelated. One, I served on the board of Respond, and I'll say it's one of the best organizations that we can be partnered with. I mean, they are the direct impact that they have on survivors is just second to none. So it's a really, really good town resource that we have available to us that I think the more we can get that out, the better off for the community. The other question is unrelated, but it kind of ties into the budget generally. I've been hearing more and more about some concerns that were expressed about, and this would also go for fire, some concerns about delayed response times on the west side, and specifically if there are, trains and the like, that does delay. And we're talking about some, new development that we know is going in, new residential that's going in, some building conversion, some new construction. The Tarrant Lane project as well, which is also, part of Wakefield on that side of the tracks. Are there any concerns that the department has currently, or is there any kind of thinking that we should be considering about the idea of some sort of sub-present, like substation presence or other presence on that side? Because it seems like we're going from industrial to residential, and I've heard officers mention, if you get stopped there, you're waiting a few minutes before you can cross over the tracks there. Right. So it can be a really precarious situation when when time is of the essence. Has there been much dialogue on that piece of things?
Wouldn't be doing my job as a department head if I didn't say I want more money. And I want more police officers, and I want more police stations and cars and everything else. But quite frankly, I mean, we're on the road all the time, and that's a patrol area for us, dedicated patrol over there, like other parts of the town. So we're really not worried about that. That's more of a fire issue, getting over the tracks, because we can always, our cruisers, we can always get over the tracks, unless we're, it's a matter of however long the train is. If not, we can get on the next, it's easy for us to get on to the next crossing and hop across that way. Is it a concern? Of course, we're gonna have a large number, 80, whatever the units are over there. That's gonna change the dynamic, but I'm not gonna come in with inflated numbers that I don't have any data to support them. So I'm confident that the way we operate and the way we deploy our personnel shouldn't impact that. Now, having said that, probably the best or worst case scenario was the morning, December 26, 2000, when we had the Edgewater massacre. We couldn't get over the tracks. But yeah, that was the anomaly, thankfully, in a situation like that. But usually for a regular service call, we have personnel, they better be, or they should be, on that side of the tracks. That's your area of responsibility. So we have a whole plan and how we deploy our personnel. So right now, I'm not really worried about it. Maybe next year, we'll have to take another look at it and see what our calls for service are over there. But it's all based on, calls for service, the types of call, the type of neighborhood it is, whether people are driving, whether they're using the commuter rail for their main mode of transportation. And there's a whole bunch of factors that I'd be interested in looking at as we go forward. Unless you want to build me a police station over there, we'll gladly take it.
Well, I'm just thinking, not necessarily, just the idea of, if we were to have just staff just differently positioned, not necessarily growing the staff, but just differently positioned. And I think Chief Sullivan might have, some comments on that too. I would imagine, because of the, what the development that's going on there. It's changing the characteristics a bit of that area.
And, we're gonna have, quite honestly, we're gonna have the same, we're gonna take a good look at up off of Hopkins Street. For us, there's one way up, for both Chief Sullivan and the fire service as well as us, there's only one way up there.
Right.
And if that bridge, for whatever reason, is out of service or closed down, we have to go all the way around up 28 and come across the back way. And, thankfully, we have good relationships with our communities, and the fire service does a great job at mutual aid. But, we can always rely on Reading to kind of hold the fort until we get there. But I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to put that burden on the town of Reading Police Department. So, that's a concern being up there, because we have one way in and one way out over there. So that's another thing that we should be looking at going forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Chief, thank you very much for all you do and the officers do. It's just echoing it, what everyone else has said tonight. But also, we all went to the MMA convention downtown, and just thinking about the one module I went to with Dr. Ruth, and she's a general practitioner out in the western part of the Mass, and she identified during her little presentation that her son is addicted to cocaine. And she's been a doctor for 25, 30 years, and she can't get him to stop. And so I think that really highlights the fact, I think we all know it's an epidemic, but this was a very moving presentation. And I think that everything you're doing certainly is going to add to getting us out of, hopefully, this hole we seem to be in with 7 deaths over 14 months. It's just horrible. But when the doctor couldn't get her son, she says the dealer comes over every Thursday. And he's back to work on Monday, but she's just beside herself. And she's a real proponent of stopping it. And she can't stop her own son from doing it. So the epidemic is certainly out there. And we know it in town, unfortunately. But thank you for all you're doing. Great
Thank you,
job.
sir. I appreciate that. But it's you know, quite frankly, it's the men and women back there that are doing all the work, and they're the ones that deserve the kudos, because they're out there
Sure.
in the middle of the night when it's snowing and raining and everything else. And,
Right.
You know, so I'll certainly pass those kudos on to them, because they're the ones that are doing the work.
It's
And
not
I
just
appreciate
Lieutenant
that.
Scory behind you. Behind
You
you.
notice I didn't point.
No. No, but thank you very much. Did you have, Paul, did you have a quick one?
We're all set as far as this part of it's concerned. I'm only thinking what we have in front of us
Sure.
on the screen.
Sure.
Do we want to, are we going to try to have a vote before we have that presentation, Mr. Mayo? How do you,
I think you want to wait.
wait for the vote?
I think you want to wait for the presentation.
Right.
And if we have the chief here now, and I don't see anybody from Wave here, can we take care of Wave, the white ribbon as well? Because the chief is the representative for that as well, isn't he?
Do it after.
Yeah, let's do it after. I think it's,
Yeah, okay.
That's all right. So, if I can have a motion?
No, I don't think you want one yet.
Not yet?
But before we switch gears,
Oh,
can I
okay.
say,
Oh, right,
can I say one
Yeah.
thing?
Yes,
Before we switch gears to
please.
something like parking, I do want to
Okay.
commend the chief and his entire staff. I mean, really, one of the first departments around here that embraced the whole social aspect of the job. And that's been, you don't see these partnerships between, years ago, you see it starting now, between the police and the Board of Health, and really tackling these issues. And that is really what Chief Smith has brought to us and continues to go on. And when he says that Narcan is the last resort, I mean, I know it because I've talked to him about it. He does feel that way. He doesn't want to ever use one dosage of it, if he can prefer it, if he can. So I do appreciate all you and all the guys and ladies of the police department do, so thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that.
Now you can go Monday.
No, it's not Monday. It's very critical, actually, too. So for the parking enforcement analysis, Ed, do you want to jump on that one with your stats?
Sure. So I know that we've, as a body, been talking about parking enforcement as a consideration, a concern that we all have and share. And last meeting, I indicated that I would do some research, and get some numbers together to present before this body. And specifically, I put together just a few slides to talk through the issue. So the parking enforcement analysis, in essence, we're facing 3 challenges right now, I think we can collectively agree. We have a chronic issue of extended parking in violation of the posted limits. We have limited or inadequate, depending on your position, number of available spots for customers to support our local businesses, especially in downtown and in Greenwood. And we have inconsistent enforcement, which Lieutenant Scory was able to speak about last time, because our uniformed officers are understandably called away for more urgent matters. So some of the decision-making drivers, you'll notice, pun intended, and objectives are to create increased parking spot turnover, which seems to be one of the biggest issues. There's been a lot of anecdotal stories that have come to us of people who have observed cars all day parked in the same spot. And it seems to be at times a chronic problem, but there's just not the turnover. And without the turnover, we don't have the availability. So the thinking is that with more turnover, we'll have more availability and more accessible parking spaces. What's unique about this proposal is that we have the opportunity to create 2 new jobs. Each of them would be at 19 hours per week. And that means that they are straight up part-time jobs. We don't have the benefits that would come with them, so we don't have that additional cost, which I think, Steve, is probably about a third increase to the salary. It also allows us to refocus our policing efforts to the best use. You know, we have a highly trained, highly skilled, and talented police force, and they are better utilized in policing in community policing in other ways than an informal keeping tabs on license plates. And this proposal is also projected to be budget neutral, meaning that while there are costs, they're expected and anticipated to be offset by the revenue that's generated from violations, and I'll go into that just very briefly. And we even have the potential for it to be a potential revenue generator, although that's not the driver behind this, but it would be not a bad secondary benefit. So I have here right now, if anyone's gotten one of these in the past, this is a violation. And there are, in essence, 4 groups of violations we have here in town. I didn't list them all. Anyone who has a parking ticket has probably seen them. But predominantly, we're looking at Group A violations, which are $25 currently. That's things like overtime parking, which is specifically what we're talking about. It's parking beyond the posted hour limit or 2-hour limit. Double parking, parking in a crosswalk, blocking a fire lane, impeding street cleaning, et cetera. The $50 Group B, parking in a fire hydrant or blocking snow removal. Group C is $125, parking in a designated handicap spot, and Group D is $100 parking in a bus stop. So that's the current structure right now, and the composition of tickets obviously varies between those 4 groups. So currently with the police officer engagement, we're underutilizing their training, experience, and expertise. They're unable to consistently enforce because of the priorities that they have. And candidly, it's not an efficient use of town resources. A police officer is, if you look at it on an hourly basis, is probably 1.5 times what the proposal would be per hour when you factor in benefits. So it's overpaying a position that doesn't utilize the talents of our officers. For perspective, with the I'll call it inconsistent, although there have been efforts, we have collected about $36,000 in fiscal 18 from violations revenue, and a year to date we're at about $19,000 fiscal year 19. So that just gives us some perspective, and that's with inconsistent enforcement. So I contacted, and then thank you, Steve, as well, and Lieutenant Scory for pitching in with that, too. I contacted in total 16 different communities, and I created a sense for us of kind of where we would rank in terms of where we would come in at an hourly for this. 3 communities, Ipswich, North Andover, North Reading, are all unique. Ipswich and North Reading utilizing the police currently. North Andover utilizes a community service officer. And Reading, that is a $22 an hour, but that person performs other functions, so it's not a great comparison. Long story short, a proposal of $17.50 an hour for this position seems to, you can see the red line dropping down, seems to align with maybe where we should fall for this position going forward. As far as what we would need to break even, we'd be looking at less than 8 violations a day, less than 8 of the $25 violations. That's the Group A. So if we had the handicap parking, for example, or one of the bigger offenses, that obviously skews this a bit. So if we were to take the $17.50 an hour times, the math is here obviously, the 19 hours per week times the 2 positions, we're just shy of $35,000. Speaking with Steve to make sure that we budget appropriately, if we figured in about $40,000, I'm sorry, $38,000 total for salary / payroll taxes, et cetera, and then another $10,000 for material and supplies. And this is for fiscal 20, understanding that we would be purchasing two devices, and those would be one-time purchases. There are certain maintenance costs associated with them. There's like a data on a monthly basis is like $50, things of that nature. But in essence, we're looking at about a $48,000 expenditure fiscal year 20, and then our break even is just north of, again, 7.5 violations per day at the $25 rate. If we have violations that are greater than that, then obviously the number of violations goes down. And some of the benefits related to this too, we would free up our police officers' time and payroll for better aligned responsibilities, and we would certainly increase the parking space turnover. And this may be anecdotal at first. It's difficult to measure. We can certainly measure how many citations we have. It's difficult to measure how much more opportunity this creates for parking. But I think it's a safe bet to say that we all know that there are plenty of spots that just don't have that turnover currently that would be able to now. So with all of that in mind, I would propose that for this fiscal year, we endeavor to pursue this at the $48,000 level, understanding that we can always revisit it at some later point in time. But it seems to be aligned with a number of other communities. It should be budget neutral, if not even more beneficial to our town. But there's also that intangible of having available parking, and this will not be a solve. I don't think there's one thing that's going to solve all of this. But I think it's a piece to a broader puzzle. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Tony?
Would this Monday through Friday position?
Well, that's something that,
Because spots don't magically open up on Saturday.
Right.
Paul and I get hammered just about every weekend about Saturday parking, especially in Greenwood.
I think there are a couple different ways we can approach it. One of them is, again, and this would fall under the police department budget, but it's a civilian position, and one of the ways we could consider it would be 5 of 6 days. And so it could be rotating, so you don't know on a particular day. Maybe like next week it's Tuesday, they're not going to be on, or whatever the case is. We can certainly expand it to 6 days, and that's something that we could be watching. But I think at the initial, probably 5 with that, kind of 1 day rotating would make more sense.
No, I'm okay with that.
To allow for that.
Spots don't magically open up on Saturdays, and, Sundays I can see, being fine.
Right. Ian?
I've heard some concerns, saw some concerns about, we can't go to dinner now because you spend 3 hours at dinner, but it ends at 6 p.m.
It does, yeah. This is just the current enforcement hours, so it's.
If you want a long lunch from 1 to 4, then you can get up and move your car. I know that's a terrible thing, but we all grew up in certain, moving our car if it was at a 2-hour spot. That's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean,
I don't think that's going to be the rare person, frankly, who's staying past 2 hours. And I saw some stuff about hair appointments that go longer than 3 hours. Then maybe you park a little further down a street that doesn't have this. I think it's absolutely worth it to get the turnover. I like the 5-day rotating. As you said, if it doesn't work, then it will work. And I don't think we need to look for. We could have less than 7.5 violations. The person's not going to go creating more violations. It
Right.
is what it is. So I think we should try it, and we'll see what happens at the end.
And there's also a benefit too of, to your point, even if we don't have the 7.5 violations, there is that intangible.
Yeah.
What is
Right.
the price you can assign to having freed up parking?
No, that's right.
And I don't know what that is, but if you're driving around and making 2 or 3 loops around, and then you end up not going to business because of it, then that's been far more costly to everybody, the consumer.
Meals tax.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, lost meals tax, lost business opportunities. So with that too, I also wanted to just introduce what I am calling the Wakefield Parking Warrior. These are the devices. So this would be the Wakefield Parking Warrior. The devices themselves, they have a stylus. Very simple, very straightforward. They're able to scan so that it scans the wheels themselves so that you can see where the valve is when you're going through. That's the way they monitor. They're also able to take photographs of plates. They're able to do a number of different things. But the beauty of this is the citation prints out right from here.
That's awesome.
And we can leave it, right in the vehicle in that case. We would want 2 of these. And again, the upfront cost of these would be the biggest expense, about $2,500 a piece.
If I recall, we got a discount through MMA.
We did, actually, yeah. Peter and Tony both, were perusing, these with me. Thank you both for that, because I know you both had a lot of good input on it. And we get a lot of discounts across the board based on our membership. So that's where we stand. Here it is right here, though. But it's a pretty cool device, and it's easy to use. It's the sort of thing that anybody that we hire would be able to be easily trained. It's not a high skill set required. And the $17.50 an hour starting is I think a very good starting salary. I mean, I think there are a few times, especially in government, where you're able to create new positions in a budget neutral way. And this is, I think, one of those opportunities. So I think this checks a lot of boxes for us.
Julie?
How much did you say that costs?
$24.90, I think, $2,500.
$2,500.
Right.
And we would need two. And
Two of them.
so I have some concerns about this. First of all, we think it's gonna be budget neutral, but we're not sure it's gonna be budget neutral, right? I mean, I did a little research as well. It looks to me like Reading actually only has one part-timer for a size about the size that we have, and they also do animal control. So, I mean, I looked at a couple different places. What about a vehicle for the person? What about, you know, I think you covered some of the technology, clothing supplies, insurance. I just want to make sure that we really are thinking about all the all-in costs, because I agree that there's a bit of an intangible for freeing up parking spaces, and I don't want to debate here whether, you know, kind of the parking need and the parking not need. I understand the need for this, but I'm really fearful that having two part-time people, I mean, you say 7.5 violations a week, which I assume, I'm sorry, a day, which is 56 a week. In Andover, in Stoneham, they wrote 2,800 tickets last year, which is about 53 a day. So that includes Sundays. I'm just not convinced we're gonna get the amount of violations, and I really don't even love the idea of kind of having two people have to work for their job kind of enforcing. I think you're gonna see that somehow we're gonna have to maintain that or back it down. So I guess if we're gonna look at this, I would start small and then go to, you know, maybe two part-time people. But I have very, very serious concerns. And I mean, we have been sitting here for about an hour now, and I've heard that, you know, there are needs for funding for police details at the high school, and I've heard that we need funding for support groups, and we talked about maybe we need funding for a grant writer, and I'm just not convinced that, you know, spending $40,000 to $50,000 on this is what we really should be spending our town money on. I frankly would much rather spend that kind of money on an economic development person that we've all advocated for here, and I think that that would be much more beneficial for our entire community.
Julia, I wish you would reach out to me actually before, because we could have spoken about this, but in fact,
Well, I just got the presentation this morning, so it's hard.
But in fact, the $36,000 that was collected in fiscal 18, this is not, there's two sides of this. There's a cost, but there's the revenue. And when you're looking at 36,000 in fiscal 18, that's 36,000 from more limited enforcement. It was not enforcement, you know, that was 38 hours per week. So that's the difference. So I think that our historical data already supports the fact that we have been collecting revenue at a good clip with more limited enforcement. With stepped up enforcement, I think common sense would suggest that those numbers would just go up. We're at 19,000 collected fiscal 19 year to date, you know, basically halfway through the year. So you're just shy of, you know, analyzing that out to about 40,000. As far as the vehicle, I'm glad you raised it, and I apologize for not having raised that. I've actually been working with Steve on that and the Gas and Light Department as well, and a really unique opportunity that we have here is we're working with Gas and Light, and I also spoke with the chief, and other options too to get us from downtown to Greenwood. One of those options is an electric car that Gas and Light is very interested in pursuing with us, that would be very minimal cost ultimately, and provide a lot of environmental benefits to us. And so we have those opportunities as well, which I think are really a way to kind of expand this program. Certainly, just based on the numbers as I see them, I don't see this as spending $48,000. I see this as putting forward $48,000 with a revenue return to us in an approximate amount. So I don't see this as an outlay in some way you're suggesting.
I mean, and thank you for that, and I guess when I think of this through, like, we've talked a lot about parking, and we talked about signage, and that's not happened yet. I feel like this is just a little premature. I mean, we don't direct people to where parking is, we don't have interactive maps like Andover does, where you can go and you can see it, and this, I mean, I thankfully have not seen any one of these, but can you pay this online? I mean, you can pay that online, so that's great. So
You can appeal online too.
and you can appeal, excellent.
And
So I really think that parking is the face of kind of the town, and I would just want to make sure that, you know, we're doing everything we can to make sure that
Well, I
You
don't
know,
think-
we are welcoming.
I don't know that parking's the face of the town. I think it's probably the problem of the town. But with respect to that, as far as awareness, this would be for fiscal year 20, so we'd be looking as of July 1. Certainly, a big part of going forward on this project would be to make sure that we had an awareness campaign out there. You know, we have a responsibility to make sure that we can provide merchants, you know, sufficient opportunities for them to park off-site that are safe and that are, you know, within walking distance, you know, to their own businesses. And I think we've taken steps to do that, certainly. This is ongoing. But unless and until we have a better sense of what kind of availability or capacity we actually have as a community in terms of parking, it's harder to make those determinations going forward in terms of, you know, what needs still exists. And I know Tony and Peter, we've spoken at length about this, I know separately, and that's something that's important to us, you know, relative to that. And I know that, Ann, you've raised it in the past with me too, we've discussed it. So that's something that I want to make sure that we're doing this. And if for some reason we find that it's not budget neutral, then we can revisit it. I don't think that this is ultimately a significant outlay. I just don't see it. Like any position. I mean, emergency management, we'll speak about that, you know, later on. I don't see it as a significant outlay.
Can we just ask the police chief too?
Well,
what
actually,
you
Paul
think?
had
Go
a
ahead.
question first.
Okay,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Paul, or statement, sorry.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Just real quickly, go back a little bit. This initiated due to the merchants and the citizens of the town asking us to do something about the parking issue. It wasn't something that we just conceived. It's been an ongoing issue, and I have the emails to prove it, and the phone conversations, and the one-on-ones, and I can pull everyone in and have a nice little sit-down with any counselor in here to say, yeah, okay, this is an actual habit, or not habit, but a problem that exists. When we initiated this from the beginning, the first part was that the 1-hour parking signs were wrong. And that's what I was charged with doing, starting it off. And yes, you're not putting the cart before the horse. You're actually making the right choice by putting the enforcement piece into play. And then once that happens, as soon as this council votes on the signage parts, put the signage up, because that will be our next task.
I actually thought we were gonna talk about the signage before this. So-
Right, but the signs, this only gets it onto the ballot in April for a job to be starting in July 1st. If we,
Yeah, does this have to go to town meeting?
This, well, the budget goes to
The
town.
whole budget
The
would go to
budget
town
goes
meeting,
to
but this
town.
would not be able to be debated separately in town meeting.
Well, you can
Could you?
We could
Yeah,
debate it,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, but the position wouldn't start until July 1st, correct? Okay, so if the council approves the list that Lieutenant Scory and I put together, okay, when we discuss it later, all the signage can go up immediately or can be ordered, and then the changes can happen that way. Personally, our downtown isn't our only business district. By having one part-time, they would never be able to get down into Greenwood, where I'm getting 70% of my complaints right now. Not downtown, but it's outside of the downtown. And you've been part of the emails as well, too. And that's a regular basis that I'm getting those calls. 6, 7 individuals constantly. What about the parking? How come it needs to be enforced? Okay, here's a solution. You need that the 2 people to go a larger expanse. Main Street is huge, and that list alone shows you what has to be enforced. Where parking is no parking, where there's 2-hour parking. It's a large area. And there's still an area that the TAC is going to have to come up with for what we've approved. This body has approved for parking relief over the last 8 years that isn't on this list. The area is large. One last thing, with the 5-day work day, make one person work Saturday and have them start Tuesday through Saturday and the other one work Monday through Friday, and rotate that. I wouldn't rotate them one day back. I just create a position where one of them had the Saturday job. So Tuesday to Saturday, and one worked Monday through Friday.
So,
Understand that, Paul, they're not both, these are two part-time positions.
Right.
So collectively, it's a one full-time position. So
Right.
it's a 38-hour work week, so it's the idea of how you can do that. I mean, you can do it any number of ways. There would just be hours that would not be, of
there's
non-enforcement.
going to be hours right now because they're
Regardless,
part-time,
there would
that they're
be.
not going to be out there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's flexibility there, and I think that's something that, I mean, that's kind of, I don't want to be micromanaging, how
You're
that would
right.
be.
But I do agree
from a
with,
global
I do
sense,
agree,
yeah.
though, that this will bring in the revenue to pay for the two part-timers and the handheld over time, because even the lieutenant mentioned their job as officers aren't strictly to enforce parking.
Agreed.
And he's, in various conversations we've had here, they may do Albion Street today, they may do Greenwood tomorrow, they may do Lincoln Street another, it's not consistent, or the same area is not consistent. So we really don't have a makeup of a town-wide enforcement. And if that is, I guarantee you, our numbers are gonna be in the 80s. I'm just telling you, it's gonna be a lot higher, because people are going to complain, and they always do. And just the people that use the T, the buses and the trains alone, when they start getting tickets for being there, especially if they're there all day, that's gonna be revenue coming in. I'm just saying. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, anything we do, we actually can tweak. Anything we've talked about before, we can tweak, but I think, I've lived in town 25 years. A lot of people have lived here. Paul's been on the Board of Selectmen and Town Council for 10 years. So we've all had complaints over the last number of years, and I think that we do need to do something. This is like one of the top 10 items we've been talking about since I've been here. So I think that we're not gonna know the actual factors and percentages of what's gonna work, what's not gonna work, but I'll tell you, when the employers, which I still don't get, when they tell the employees, just park in front of our establishment, I don't care if you're a dental office or you're working for H&R or whatever, I just think it's crazy that some of the problems are created by our own businesses in town. Never mind the people that are getting a freebie, parking downtown, parking in North, parking in Greenwood, and just clogging it up for 8 to 10 hours. I mean, that's just, it's horrible, and I think it's time we do take some action. And I think it's gonna be financially sound, but some of this, I think we have to just work it through. I think it's gonna work. There's gonna be some tweaking for sure, there's gonna be some other expenses maybe that come up, but I think it's time we need to stop talking about it and taking calls about people complaining. I think we need to do something. Ed?
I think it's also important to point out that we are continuing to offer free parking throughout the town. And that's something that a lot of other communities just don't do. I know that we had considered it at various points, is metering appropriate, are pay stations appropriate? We're not doing that. We're offering free parking to the town, that does not change. But with that free parking comes the greater likelihood of someone taking advantage of that if there's not enforcement. And so I think that just underscores the importance of needing some sort of regular enforcement because of the fact that otherwise, there's no mechanism to try to better regulate that. And I think it's a waste of our resources if we have the police department going around writing down license plates on a notepad because you are too talented, too well-trained, and too well-paid to be doing those sorts of tasks. There are so many other opportunities that our officers can be better deployed and utilized across the town in other capacities, in any kind of community. Policing, whatever it is, I'd rather see that, an officer spend more time in the school, or, be able, be more available in some other way than going around doing this. It doesn't make any practical sense.
Joni?
To Ed's point, we offer free parking, but in certain spots, we offer all-day free parking that no one seems to take advantage of because no one wants to walk, 5 minutes to their place of business, which is a whole nother topic of conversation. But I'm curious how Officer Scory, Lieutenant Scory, and the police chief, just their thoughts on this.
Frank has his privilege, go ahead.
I want to touch on 2 subjects here. Scheduling. I think with 2 part-time personnel, it allows for a lot of flexibility. We can decide on hours and days of the week later, but nothing has to be an 8-hour shift. It could be a 4-hour shift. It could be a 6-hour shift. One day it could start at 8 a.m. It could start at noontime another day. So I think as far as covering Monday through Saturday, I don't see that as being an issue. It's just a matter of working with the personnel that will be doing the job. As far as money goes, revenue generated to cover the cost of this, we generated $36,000 last year as a police department, our officers issuing tickets, with limited time to do it. I mean, we have a lot of responsibilities. That number's pretty good, I think. So if you had 2 dedicated people doing this, and they can do more than just 1 or 2 streets per day. Now, we talk about the downtown and the Greenwood area because that's our business district, and we want the turnover there, but we have to remember, too, that we have streets like Murray Street, Cedar Street, Emerson Street. They all have time restrictions as well because commuters will deviate from the commuter parking. So if we have some people who can cover all those areas, I can't even imagine what the numbers would be.
Excellent.
Chief Long, just to follow up on that, I have a couple of questions. I'm looking at it from the 30,000 foot. Like Lieutenant said, our parking is just not in the square or Greenwood or North Ave. We deal with constantly Chestnut Street, Yale Street, Avon Street. People parking not parking at the depot, they're parking on those side streets. Armory Street, those are all quality of life issues for us because those are residential neighborhoods. So whoever and whatever schedule we decide on these people are going to work, we have to keep in mind that they're gonna have a huge responsibility of policing all those streets, and like the Lieutenant said, Murray Street, the other side of the tracks. So now I gotta get into the technical piece. Ed asked me to reach out to some of my contemporaries up on the North Shore, which I did. And you have the device there, Ed. How's the data getting into that device? Is that gonna be hand keyed, or is it gonna be a license plate reader type event?
It's scanned for the most part, so it's
So they're gonna have to scan the plate.
imaged. That's, well, they're always scanning the tire and the tire valve, and it's optional to scan the plate, is my understanding,
Okay.
how they do it.
So, just logistically, I think this is a great idea, but I just want to make sure if we're going to kick it off, we have to kick it off with few snags. How do we develop a baseline every morning? Does that mean that whoever has that device is going to have to walk up and down Main Street, up and down each one of the ladder streets, and go down to Greenwood and watch Greenwood, and then go back over to Murray Street and walk over there, so that they get that 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock violation, they come back 2 hours later, and then write the ticket? I don't, we need a baseline. Now, I can tell you what other cities and towns have done, but I think Mr. Denoco has something.
No, I wanna try to answer your question. I think the lieutenant just gave the answer to that question. Remember, the police department's going to assign the areas for the part-timers to go to. It's not gonna be a blanket of the entire town, because if they're only part-time, they're gonna be limited to how much they can do. So it's going to be up to the lieutenant and yourself as to where they're going and where they're going to be assigned. So that's how I'm gonna take it. They're not gonna have free rein as to just,
I think a lot of that will depend on how fast that device records the data.
Right.
I would like to see as big an area covered each day as possible.
Until the trial period gets done, though, you won't know that.
We won't know that. It'll be an experiment.
It'll be an experience until that. But other than that, though, I think the police department, if they're following it, is going to be the people who are going to say, we want you to take this area today. Because they're not gonna be able to go from here,
Exactly my point.
excuse me?
Exactly. Now, let me
But the
take.
next day they will be.
Okay, and I get that. We want to try to be as consistent as we can be.
Absolutely.
And a consistency has to be part of our standard operating procedure. So my next question is, if we're gonna be scanning license plates, we have CJIS area. We have CJIS issue in that the officer or the person is gonna have to be CJIS or Corey cleared, because that information falls under CJIS and we can't be disseminating that information. So we have to keep that in mind. The other thing is, how long and what are we gonna do with the data? If there's data on those machines, when we get into license plate readers, which basically if we read license plates, those become license plate readers. 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more, we had license plate readers in town, and it became an incredible problem statewide on how long we're gonna hold the data. So I think we have to think about that before we deploy, so that we have that answer. and have a good answer for that, and people are comfortable with us holding that data. Now, to your question, Paul, to your point, Paul, if we're gonna develop a baseline at 8 o'clock every morning, that's a lot of walking for somebody to go by every car on Main Street and then do, let's just say they're doing Chestnut and all those streets. The next day, they're doing North Ave and Albion Street, and the streets on the other side of, on the west side of the tracks. That's gotta be done first thing to establish baseline. Without that baseline, we can't issue the ticket. Same in Greenwood. So I think we have to keep that in mind as we go forward as a group to develop this and make it work. We have to figure out how we're gonna do and develop that baseline every morning, so that we can issue the ticket. You're right, Ed, we don't charge for parking, and that's not going to change. But, I just think we have to, technology is a great thing, and we should probably utilize the power. That's a very powerful machine. I know from talking to the Beverly chief, their system works up there, works very well, using that very same machine. I talked with Chief LaLasha this afternoon. So we have to figure out, and we should have that discussion on how we're going to actually utilize those, and then how long we have to keep the data, because whether it's a picture of a tire or it's a picture of a license plate, because we have to hold that data for appeals. And they have 29 days to appeal that citation, or that ticket. So we have to keep that in mind.
Go ahead. No, good.
So,
No, I'm going to a different topic, so you can.
Okay, so before she goes to the different topic, so, the only data that has to be saved, though, is the ones that we issue a citation to, correct?
the ticket, yes, yep.
So if I'm going down and the cars are moving in and out, they can be deleted. Oh, this one here is 2 hours and 20 minutes. I'm gonna issue a citation. That's the data that you're talking about has to be kept. Not the,
Yes.
not the prior data, because there were no violations.
Right.
Okay.
But I agree with Lieutenant Scory that if this is a very robust program, which I'm confident it will be, we're gonna be given a lot more than 7.5 tickets a day. I can tell you that. I went through this in Melrose 15, 16 years ago, and you'd be amazed. That's a lot of area to cover every day. There's a lot of violations there. And the first sweep, there's easily 7 tickets out there. So the
Well, if
lieutenant's
you're
right,
right,
there's a
we'll
lot
have
of
to
money
hire
there.
another part-timer now, won't we?
Did you reach a law, Chief, did you reach a law of diminishing returns in Melrose? We just started handing out less and less tickets?
I'm sorry?
Did you reach a law of diminishing returns in Melrose? Where you wrote so many tickets up front that people got the notice and?
Stayed consistent.
Okay.
See, we didn't have the problem in Melrose with the train, because there's 3 depots, and there's a million lots to park in Melrose, so we didn't have that. We had that problem just basically on Main Street for 2 blocks. Very condensed,
Yeah.
very narrow, and as the lieutenant said, we've got all these other streets that we have to think about, because once we start to move them off of Avon Street, they're going somewhere else.
Oh, yeah.
And, so we wanna make sure that,
Right.
and the lieutenant is due diligence with the Traffic Advisory Committee, and you, Paul, doing the signage, we have to make sure that we move on, we sign, Avon Street. We're gonna have to have some type of consistent signage 3 blocks out, because they're gonna move, and, that's just a natural course of events, You know better than anybody, you guys did the sign
I
analysis.
believe that we are making a move in the right direction, and the only way that you're really going to see whether it's going to be fruitful or not is by initiating it. Okay, we are well past the time of just saying, well, we need more time to study it. Parking studies have been done now for longer than I can ever remember, but I'm going to let my constituent here.
Maybe good.
Constituent colleague, so I'm gonna respectfully disagree with you. I actually, it's very concerning to come at this from an enforcement point of view, and that's what we're doing. And when we talked about this 2 weeks ago, we talked about the alternative signage, which we were all really excited about. And that is, I'm gonna echo what Julie said earlier, is we keep on talking about communication and education, which we have not done at all. The kiosk that's up stands empty about the parking spots that people can go to. We still don't have anything on our website. We have not had data about how successful or not successful the retailer parking spots are, or the omelet headquarter parking. It's all anecdotal. Ed, you said earlier that, you know, we'll see, this is all anecdotal at the beginning and we'll see if this works, and that's just not the way we should do policy.
Actually,
These
that's not
other
what I said,
towns,
Marian.
it is exactly what you said.
I said that it is going to be anecdotal because you cannot measure. There's no measurement. You can measure the number of violations, but in terms of capacity, how many times a particular spot turns over, there is no mechanism to do that.
So there's actually all these other towns that have done it, and we can actually talk to the other towns and talk to the police chiefs and talk to their mayors and their town administrators to actually talk about whether this works. And, you know, is it working? Is it not working? And instead of not just from an economical of, does it pay for the positions? Because I think coming at it from that direction is just not the way we want to come up with policy. So I'm just saying that I would love that we did the communication, that I wish we had talked about the signage before this, because the signage, it's great, it's 5 pages, like I can't wait till we discuss it. And communicating that there are other places to park, you know, and I know I sound like a broken record, but I will say this, I don't get the 70 calls a day. It's not 70% of what people are talking to me about. I hear from a couple of businesses every so often, and we talk about other places. And, you know, we've mentioned before, have we talked to the chamber? Have we talked to other organizations about parking somewhere else? So I have concerns as coming at this from a enforcement prerogative, and I also do want to say that, you know, we got this presentation, which doesn't have all the information, so that vehicle information would have been really helpful, but we just got it this morning. And, you know, it's not enough time to actually digest and go back and then make a decision on anything too. So I just want to raise that concern.
Sure. One rebuttal. So, the signage component, we can't announce it any further to the merchants, because they are the ones that gave us the recommendation, the merchants and the citizens, because we had 2 forums
Yep.
that we conducted, and they came in, they gave us the information on that is coming forward. Once we can't promote anything until this council accepts it.
Right.
Then we can move forward with all the promotion that we want, but we still can't do that until the town puts the signage up in the right locations. So right now, Main Street is all 1-hour parking. If we approve it, this body approves the signage, it's going to 2-hour parking. At that point, we can say it's coming only, but we can't really inform anyone until the signage actually changes. And then you can do all the announcement for the next 3 months until we actually get to the enforcement point, if this passes council right now and it's added into the budget. So there is a time frame on doing it, and I do agree with you. The more people that know, the more people they're going to say, oh, they're serious this time. It's not just a blowover, because that's what they actually have been saying right now. Oh, they're just on a kick. In a couple of months, they'll stop doing it, and then everything will be back to normal again. Well, not this time. If we make the effort and move forward with it, it won't be just something that's a couple of months and done with. I still think that we can do all the announcements that you feel is necessary, but if we wanted to add this to the budget where it belongs, it had to come out of place. Okay, and not have the signage talked about first. This had to be talked about now because his budget is still open. So we would have to add 48,000 to the 528,446. Is that right, Kevin? No, what number am I putting it to?
5899,868.
No, I'm looking at the police department. I just don't have the right number in front of me. Okay, so we'd have to make that part of our motion. that we're adding
Right.
48 to the budget that's presented to us. So we had to do it now. So I agree with you. The information has to get out to everybody. It's the timeline. I think that once we get an approval on the signage and this component, that's gonna happen after the fact. The signage gets taken care of now. And then, once we approve it and the signage is up, then we do a full media blitz. Listen, effective today, these signs are going up, okay? Get used to the signs, they will be enforced, because come July 1st, there will be two attendants walking through the town, and they will be enforcing the parking. So you have your time to get all the information out that you want before it actually initiates. Until that time, the police are just going to do their job, like they always do. There's been no public information period. If it's posted 2-hour parking, the police roll up. They've been there for over that time, they write a ticket. Okay, they've been there for 4 hours, they write a ticket. So there's no announcement until you're going to initiate and start this project. That's my opinion.
I think also on that, it's not as if posted hour limits are a new thing. So when we talk about awareness, I'm looking at it twofold. We have had signs across this town for decades that say 1 hour parking, 2 hour parking. If anyone is able to drive, they're able to read the sign. So to suggest that we have to have awareness that we have time limits for parking, that's just not accurate. The awareness I'm referring to is making it clear that we understand that there's been a certain culture that's been established where it's believed that most parking is not going to be enforced. That is changing now because we have mechanisms in place now to regulate the parking that has already been established. And to Paul's point, we're actually expanding in many spots the time from an hour to 2 hours, for example, which is beneficial to the customer and also it helps the business out. But this notion that everyone is going to be blindsided because we're going to be enforcing parking that has been posted with time limits for years is just not reality.
And that's not what I said.
That's not what
I'm
it is.
talking about communication and education of the available spots, not of the changes, which I think are great and we should do the changes. I'm talking about knowing that you can park behind town hall after hours, knowing about the online headquarters, knowing about the business spots, the 11 business spots that we created a few months ago. How are that working out? How are those business passes working? So I'm not talking about the signage, it's actually, that's not what I was saying.
And we
I was
have
actually
had coverage on that, Mayreen. There has been coverage on that. That has been promoted. We have spoken to the businesses relative to that. The businesses are aware. In fact, certain businesses have complained about certain of the merchant-only spots. But there has been awareness relative to that. Can we do more? Yeah, of course. And with respect to the surveying, I mean, surveying 16 different communities, I don't know a lot, I can't, to my recall, can't think of a number of other opportunities where we've actually gone out and independently surveyed 16 different communities, and not just our neighbors. You know, I went out to make sure that we had a broad swath, you know, of everything from like Salem to Wellesley, because they're different communities, they have different compositions. And so, you know, that does take time. Admittedly so, and this is a compilation of the amount of time that takes to speak with all of those communities. And thank you, Steve, also, and Lieutenant Scory as well, who had some information from a couple of those communities as well. That was helpful, but it was a compilation. This isn't haphazardly thought through. It's something that's been, all we're doing is, we already have the rules in place, we're simply enforcing them. And if we need to be having a stronger awareness campaign that now the rules are going to be enforced, I'm all for that. I think that makes sense. We've got several months to be able to make sure that happens before this goes into effect. In the meantime, be aware that Lieutenant Scory is still going to have officers that are out tagging cars, you know, and so it's not that there are no limits right now, but this is a process. We get this approved, we move forward with it, we make people aware that enforcement is a real thing now, and then we move to the next step. And then, you know, a year from now, we reassess and see where the numbers come in at. It should be as dynamic and fluid as any other position we have within the town.
So just one last thing, please.
Sure.
I will be the first person, and mark my words, I will be the first person that once we approve the time limit on the parking areas, Water Street, Smith Street parking lot, behind Brightview, I'll be the first person to be out there broadcasting that to everyone. But you can't broadcast anything about the parking lot areas, because there's absolutely no signage there now. None, until we approve it. So Water Street right now is just a lot. There's absolutely no enforcement right now, because there's no signage there. And you can't enforce something that has no signage. Lincoln Street parking lot, a great point was brought up by the lieutenant. There's only one spot with one sign. He says, legally, I can only give that one person a ticket, because the sign's not properly placed in the lot to cover the entire lot. So I said, well, that's ridiculous, okay? So again, the same thing that goes with Brightview. Brightview behind, I'd love to put up no overnight parking, 2-hour parking. It's not lined. You can't do it yet. But you have to have the signs in place before we can say, listen, we have 3 brand-new locations. They're all 2-hour parking, no overnight parking, effective now, okay? And then at that point, let everybody know. Send out emails to all the businesses. Send out letters to whoever. Put it on our website. I don't know how many more places for parking. We don't really have many places that we can allocate the parking, unless you want to see if the school department will allow us to park cars in the Galvin parking lot, okay? Which I'm not sure the school department will be too much of a fan for, having parking there while there's students in the building. So, I mean, I'm not sure where else you can get creative. We've studied this since the 60s. We've studied this, okay? And it's been in action by the governing body for the last 60 years. And I know only for the last, since 1988, there's never been any action on parking in this town.
Peter, can I make a motion to
Well, I was
move
gonna
forward?
say, we actually vetted that probably to the max anyway, so, but I was gonna say, I don't know if we need a motion right now, if Paul could pick up on his.
No,
actually
I think, personally, Mr. Chair, a point of order, I think what we need to do right now is to make a motion to add $48,000
Okay.
to the presented budget that Mr. Gill gave to us, and I'll let him give us the proper amount, and then have that seconded. If there's any further discussion, Mr. Chair, then goes that way. But I think, Kevin, could you please give me the budget one more time, please?
Sure, go ahead.
Just give me the numbers.
With the
Gonna
new
make it
number,
now.
Yeah, no, the old number plus, and then I'll add.
the original number
Yep.
was $5,899,868.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we approve the police department's budget of $5,899,868 with an additional $48,000 to offset the cost of the presentation that Mr. Dombrowski presented to us.
Second,
Second.
all in favor of that?
Can I just
Yes,
make a
yes.
clarification here
Sure,
for Kevin?
go ahead.
Kevin's turning red.
Okay,
Did I do it wrong?
No. You want to say 38 is added to salaries, correct?
I will break it down.
And 10,000 to materials and supplies?
Yes.
Kevin? So for
So
total of,
amended?
total of $5,947,868,
Correct.
correct?
So amended.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so 5-2? Passed. Thank you very much. That was great discussion, actually.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, well, hey, Paul, while you're warmed up, Paul, you want to start?
Do you want to do that now?
I think we should do it now, yeah. I didn't know if we were going to just bind them up before, but
Okay.
let's do it separate, yeah.
Would you like me to walk right into this?
Run?
Okay, I'll
Well,
okay, so.
Please, thanks.
Everyone had the opportunity to see the packet that I put together with the lieutenant. We made sure it was in your packets so that you can review what we discussed at our previous meeting. The last 3 documents that you see, or the last 2 documents, was the original approved parking restrictions dated 4/1/2008. The lieutenant and I sat for a lengthy period going over each and every one of these. The second document that you see is 4 pages with the larger print, so that you understand. So we went through every street that existed, and wherever we were going to keep the parking, the same, we increased it from 1 hour to 2 hour parking, everywhere. I did it, sent it back to the lieutenant, he made a couple corrections, I made the changes on this sheet, and we brought it forward. So as far as where parking's allowed, 30-minute, 15 minutes, it's all on this sheet for approval of this body. We created multiple 15-minute parking spaces, if you notice on the very last page. Okay, so we added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we added 8 additional 15-minute parking to what exists today. Merchant parking locations, we were requested by a business owner to keep them in place for the time being, because they have been using them. His only request was that we allow for multiple merchants from the same establishment to be given the tickets. I mean, the visor passes. I have no problem with that. If they wanna use them and they're willing to walk after they park, give them to them, because then there's 11 spots that will always be filled. The 3 in the Lincoln Street parking lot are always full. There's always a car in those lots and their business owners. The others, like I said, if they're going to use them, give them a ticket. The last spot I just wanted to bring to your attention is the off-street parking area. Smith Street parking lot, we're in agreement, 2-hour parking, no overnight parking. The recommendation from the lieutenant and I was to have 2 signs put up, one on the entrance, one on the exit, because people do go into that lot in the exit side. Just have the sign state in general, all parking, 2-hour only, Monday through Saturday, 8 to 6, okay, no overnight parking. Do a similar sign on the exit, and that will cover the entire lot. Water Street lot, Omelet headquarters, my concern is if we don't put 2-hour parking there, when they put those apartments and condos in, the extra overflow parking from there are going to go into that area. And without signage, they're going to not be the benefit to what we were looking for, and that was to put the merchants down there. Because I know some of them are doing it now. They're parking down there and they're walking back. A lot of them are merchants. But what happens when those apartments come in? I'm afraid that the wrong people are going to be benefiting from them. So I would request that we add 2-hour parking, no overnight parking at the Water Street site as well too, to keep it consistent.
And businesses can have
What,
something.
a voucher?
That's right, the
Something on there.
businesses will get the same,
Okay.
The voucher for those spots?
that's right.
Okay.
If they have it on there, they don't
Whatever's
get tagged, they don't get,
Okay.
it's first come, first serve.
Yep.
So whoever gets there first,
right.
as long as they have that on their card, they won't get a ticket. Which is what we're trying to do, get them off in front of the source. Behind Brightview is going to be our biggest problem. I don't know how to handle that, I really don't, because
But
it's,
Lieutenant Scary might?
well, no,
Do you
because
have
you need to line it in order to enforce it, and I don't see that happening in the near future. It's just a free-for-all back there. So, when it does get done, do we do 2-hour parking, no overnight, once it gets,
I think you would have to stay consistent with the 2-hour parking. I don't even know the boundaries of that area, what they are, so it has to be lined, but I think to stay consistent, you go with 2 hours, no overnight parking.
and then once we do take care of it, we just slap the signs up and it automatically is, because it's part of this right now.
Correct.
Okay, so I would recommend then that the last 2 spots on here, area number 2 and number 3, be consistent with area number 1, where it's 2-hour parking, no overnight parking. At the 3 lots that we're making, or telling them, this is where we'd like you to park. And other than that, I believe everyone understands that we're going from 1-hour parking in business districts only, unless the residential district was pre-established by the TAC. That's one of the increases, and that it remains 8 to 6, with no, with an exception of Sundays and holidays. And I think that covers the overall motion, all those items. So how will we proceed with that, Steve? I mean, do we, do it with with the cover sheet, approval of the cover sheet and the new,
You can make a motion to approve this as presented.
okay, I'll do it
Or
that way.
somebody
then. So, I will make a motion then that we, approve the, parking rules and regulation cover sheet in the traffic rules and orders component as presented.
With the addendum, the two addendums, right?
With the two addendums,
Right,
yes,
okay.
thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask, this is great, I think this is exactly what we need to be doing. I wanted to ask whether there was any thought given to, what we in the old days might have called like a taxi stand, but kind of in our new world called a ride share. So we encourage less people to come and park, but more people who come by car to maybe have a place where, you know, I'm looking at Uber right now, there's probably 10 cars around here. I know from state data that we had 140,000 ride shares, either had their origin from Wakefield or the destination in Wakefield in 2017. So I wonder whether that is just something that you looked at. And by the way, for every rideshare that originates in Wakefield, the town gets 10 cents of that,
So-
and we had 68,000 in 2017.
So we did not look at that.
So I wonder whether that's just something maybe in the future I would just put on your radar.
I would probably say, yes, I think we would do something like that, because, if you can designate, there's a few areas on Main Street that you might be able to designate as a ride share area, because it's actually a waiting area, isn't that?
Exactly.
Right, so there are some components, some areas that we may be able to establish as a ride share. I think that the TAC would have to really get involved onto that. And again, it could be done at any given time when they makes a presentation before us.
Great. I mean, I just think if there were some consistent rideshare availability, people might actually use that option, you know, particularly elderly people and other people who are trying to get to. So I would just appreciate your consideration of that.
Further
Dennis, write it down.
discussion, questions, discussion? No? So all in favor of the motion on the table?
I,
All opposed? So 7-0? Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Paul? Thank you. Awesome. Only took 2 years to get that all together, right? That was great, thank you. Okay, sure. Yeah,
Lieutenant, thank you for your, assistance. Without you, I don't think I would have been able to get half of this. Thank you.
So Chief, if you,
Actually, can we
Sure.
postpone the
The
wait till the
Wakefield Alliance?
our next meeting? Yeah, it'll still be in time for March, and we'll get some of the other members here. Is that okay?
Fine with me.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter.
let's postpone it till our next
Okay,
meeting.
so
If,
February 25th?
yeah,
sure, just table it. That's
yeah,
fine.
we'll table it till,
No one's opposed to that, right? That's fine, that's fine, man.
February 25th.
So
get to-
Chief, I think you're off the hook. Thank you very much for coming in, and
You're
that was,
welcome.
Budget is
Thank
the
you.
longest budget.
right.
No, so I gotta be
Thank
real
you very
quick.
much. Kevin, that was a nice job, too. Paul threw you on the numbers, but worked out fine.
Did I? Michael?
Okay, so actually, if we go to,
Tom? Want to come up?
should we do
I think
the,
do fire,
Just
yeah, do
fire.
fire.
Who, fire?
okay,
Fire?
let's do fire.
Sorry, Tom.
So now we'll do number 1, which is number 17 in the fire budget.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Mr.
staying here.
Chairman. Budget number 17, the fire department budget.
Okay.
We are recommending an increase over fiscal 19 of $199,558. This increase breaks down under the personal services. The increase is $179,558. We increase the overtime accounts, $60,000 based on current and prior year usage. The balance of the increase, $119,558, is for contractual and negotiated increases. There are currently no new positions. Under contractual services, there's an increase of $5,000. Several increases and decreases under contractual services. We increased the auto maintenance line item, $2,000. We increased the miscellaneous equipment repair, $4,000. Both of these were based on current and prior year costs. Increased radio maintenance, $2,000 due to increased costs. We decreased the EMT certification and training line item, $5,000 based on current and prior year costs. And we increased the unclassified line item, $2,000, which is for an attendance tracking system. Under materials and supplies, is an increase of $14,000. Several increases here. We increased the motor vehicle parts, $2,000. We increased gasoline and tire line items, each $1,000. Both of these, again, current and prior year costs. We increased medical supplies, $3,000. In fiscal 18, we did have a grant where we were able to purchase many items at the end of the year. We purchased some Narcan, defibrillator supplies, and EpiPens. But as the police chief had mentioned, there is a shelf life, so we need to be able to replenish those supplies. We increased the public safety materials and supplies, and we increased the uniform and clothing line item, $5,000 based on the cost of the new protective gear. The total budget request for fiscal 2020 is $5,512,860.
Tony, do you want to, just a quick question?
Well,
You're the liaison.
I've had several conversations with Chief Sullivan, and recently several meetings with the chief, Steve, president of the fire union, and captain on the fire department, as well as a line firefighter, with regard to a deputy chief position, which is something that we have been talking about for a couple of years, and I think is so well deserved. As hard as Chief Sullivan's working, he's trying to do so many things, and I believe a deputy chief is only going to increase the proficiency of our fire department to really focus on training and education and standard best practices, looking at equipment, working very closely with the chief, doing emergency management, working closely with that department as well. So I know it's a big increase, but I think as we did a deputy for the police department, it just makes sense to do a deputy for the fire department. This was a negotiation that was back and forth. I don't think it was ever contentious. I think we said things we wanted. We got pushback. The fire department put things on the table. We talked about numbers. It was a very I was glad to be a part of such a collegial negotiation where everyone really wanted the best for the fire department, and conversely, then the citizens of Wakefield. So, to me, it's a no-brainer really to have this position in there, especially where we have one with the police department, and I think it will allow Chief Sullivan to free him up to do certain things that he's been balancing so many balls in the air and doing it well, but I think a deputy position can only make everyone better. So they were great meetings, and everyone who worked in it was very respectful and very aware of making this position, available to folks within the fire department who want to potentially move up the ranks in that way. So.
Thank you, Ann. Tony?
Yeah, I'd be kind of curious how that whole process moves forward, because I do agree with you, there needs to be some type of succession plan, because we won't have the dear chief forever. But again, Chief, as I said to Chief Smith, thank God, for the work that you and your team do, especially with the First Baptist Fire. You really showed your colors there. But just a quick question. I'm not going to keep you up here as long as Chief Smith. Engine 2 in Greenwood, what is the condition of that engine?
It's a 2000 Seagrave, so
Okay.
it's 19 years old.
Yeah.
It's getting tired.
Uh-huh.
One of the things I was hoping to accomplish in the next fiscal year was to get a town to purchase another engine. If that does happen, then that engine would go to Greenwood and replace engine 2.
Okay.
Well, to be more accurate, engine 2 would come out of frontline service, go into reserve service, and the 1996 Seagrave that's served us for the last 3 years very diligently would be retired.
Okay. Are we just throwing money down the chute with engine 2? Are we just spending a lot of money in repairs and maintenance?
Well, right now, it's worth $650,000.
Okay.
I mean, we're doing our due diligence. I mean, compared to the cost of a new piece.
Sure.
It still isn't approaching, that by any stretch of the imagination. Frankly, I'm a little concerned about the 96 Seagrave. I really hope to get another 2 or 3 years out of it. It's coming up on 3 years, and it's really starting to show signs of quitting. We had a pretty substantial oil leak in it, which we fortunately were able to repair without too much damage. But I would be anxious to see engine 2 come out of the 2000 come out of frontline service and go into reserve service. I think we get a few more years out of it. And then that would logically be the next piece that would be taken out of service.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well,
Doing an outstanding job, even shorthanded, you're doing a great job. But that leads to my question. Right now, you're down 3 bodies?
3, yes.
Timeline out, what are we looking at?
Well, actually, to be more accurate, we're actually down 1 body. 2 of them are in the I have 2 people in the academy. The biggest obstacle or roadblock I have to hiring new people is that they can't start on the department until they've gone through the fire academy, which, if you think about it, makes perfect sense.
That's correct.
The trouble is that there's such a large backlog of recruits awaiting to go through the fire academy that these 2 gentlemen were hired in March, I believe, and or at least they were told they were offered a job as a firefighter in March. They didn't actually start at the academy until December 31st, and they'll be graduating on March 8th. Both of them are doing very well, and they'll graduate on March 8th. And I'm hoping to get them right to work as soon as we get them out.
And the third?
The third, we need to call for a list. Part of it is, it's very discouraging to have a wait list so long, so I wanted to get through the budget process. We had put up quite a bit of energy into discussing, deputy chief and so forth, and just typical year-end stuff. But yes, we will be calling for a list and getting that process.
It's just that the overtime amount just gets higher and higher.
Yeah, I have 3 members, presently I have 3 members, who are not there, 3 slots that aren't there. 2 of them are in the academy, there's the extra one. I have a member on military leave who's been, I want to say May, at least May or June he went out. I'm hoping he's going to come back this summer. And I've also been plagued by a number of injuries. At least 3 or 4 department members who've been out for 3 or 4 months. Not at the same time, but staggered through the year, so.
But then you're doing even more an outstanding job with the lesser amount of personnel, so.
Yeah, I'm anxious to get the positions filled.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Ed, for either Steve or Ann, with the deputy chief position, can you maybe talk a little bit about the offsets potentially with the emergency management role in that position and how we can kind of offset costs?
Do you want me?
Yeah, you want to take that one?
We've talked about this, and we actually still need to have some information back from the other captains in the fire department, so we're going to ask that we bring this back to this group so there's more time for us to vet this out, I think. We talked about it. I have thought a lot about this and actually gone back and forth in my own mind. I've spoken with Council Santos and with Tom Walsh, who's doing a great job as our emergency management director. I would like to say that even if we were to approve a deputy chief in this budget process, by the time that goes through the civil service process to actually go through the steps in the assessment center for the officers to go through that, you're looking at, what do we say, 3 to 6 months to have an assessment center on that? So you're looking minimum, so you're looking at probably year end. calendar year end. So I think we need to move forward and keep the emergency management in place for now, and then see what happens next year, because we'll only be doing this for half a year. But we'll be bringing that back on the fire budget in the next, probably in the next round. But we need to get a little bit more back from the captains. The other thing is that would we, in the beginning, and I've thought about this back and forth, putting too much on the new deputy without having a separate emergency management section, at least to start with that? So I weigh that back and forth, because we've done a lot of work on emergency management, including getting back some big grants, and hopefully will be some big reimbursement of money spent, I should say, which hopefully I'll be able to, when we get the final out of FEMA, I'll let you guys know. I just want to make sure we get that number. And that's going to be in the $160,000 range for turn of money to the town that we've spent. That's real money and would cover a lot of that. So I know I'm being wishy-washy on this, and I'm usually not, so I'm sorry about that, Ed. But
Steve and I have talked about this back
You know.
and forth, and I've talked to the chief, certainly, I've talked to some of the captains about the emergency management component of it. I do think it makes sense probably to keep things perhaps status quo right now, because we're not going to fill this position until the end of the year based on civil
Yeah.
service and
Calendar year.
calendar year, assessment center. And there are so many other roles that this deputy chief is going to walk into. I'm not sure if it makes sense maybe for one more budget
more round,
cycle,
and then we
one
can
more
take a look at
round, to keep them separate and then have it subsumed in. But that's, Steve and I kept going back and forth, and with the fire department as well, so.
I just think it makes the budget more palatable if there's a way that it can be.
It does.
Those responsibilities can be subsumed
does.
into the lieutenant. 'Cause
Absolutely.
I understand,
it may take a couple of cycles to get that, though.
but if we're talking, so we're talking end of calendar year, so we're really looking at half a year's, half
Right.
a fiscal year salary,
Right.
basically, is what you're saying for this lieutenant chief.
Yes.
And then the emergency management would just continue on through FY '20.
Right.
Yes.
But the expectation is that there would be
I
a
think that we'd have to
reevaluation,
revisit that in the next budget cycle.
like FY '21 would be.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I think that would be an important conversation to be
Right.
had.
Right, and I think we'll have more of history, and we'll know what's been happening, and then.
And it has
I
been had.
can-
I've
yeah.
had in-depth conversations with some of the captains about this. But I think just the timing makes sense probably for us to come back for 2021.
So if we're really looking at this more of like in essence, like an overlap. Like
Exactly.
we're getting,
That's right.
we're getting a deputy up and kind of running, assessing kind of
Yes.
his or her
Yeah.
responsibilities.
And then we'll have,
And then from
and then
there-
reevaluate.
Reevaluate.
Absolutely.
I think that makes,
And I agree with you.
yeah,
I
I feel
think
more
ultimately,
comfortable
in my
doing
mind,
that.
Yeah.
I do think it subsumes it.
Right.
Yep.
Chief did mention the fire truck. We've had a lot of conversations
Yeah.
about that. That's a route that would go through capital, and what we have done, just so you know, with fire apparatus in the past, is that does go through a separate article. When you think about having, and it would be a bonded issue. One thing to bear in mind, that it takes a good year to get a fire apparatus, because it's got to be really built to spec. They're not on the lot anymore because, so it does take a while. So when we say that we have a 1996, even if we approved this today and magically had the bond done today, it'd be a year from now before we'd get something in that end. So it's something to keep in mind when we go forward.
So what, can you, thank you for explaining that, because I know we keep on talking about needing to replace it, and Chief is being optimistic, saying 2 to 3 years. So when do we have the conversation?
Well, we're going through capital, it'll be this budget cycle.
We're doing
Yeah,
it this
yeah, yeah,
capital.
yeah, yeah.
I
This- the
didn't, I
conversation
thought
is
you
this
said
budget
we
cycle.
had to do it, sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Got it,
I
no,
wasn't clear.
that's great. I'm glad that we're having that, that's.
Just a quick question, just for my own edification. What's the general cost? I know they're extremely expensive. Do you know what, is it like $1 million, or is it?
For a pumper?
Yeah, for the pumper you had in mind.
Yeah,
Just as-
about 690.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I wasn't sure, just,
There are pumpers that are less expensive than that, just to be 100% clear.
right.
But you get what, you literally get what you pay for.
We're not
Right.
gonna be king
And
of-
We
and
want,
the
yeah.
trucks that we have managed to last, well, the oldest one we have is a 96.
Right.
Right,
The average life expectancy for a fire truck is 15 to 20 years, and that's already lasted 22.
right.
They're stainless steel bodies and you know, they don't rot. The systems fail on them before they rot out.
Right. Okay.
A lot of money, though.
Yeah, we should go with your input, obviously, so that's important.
We did look at, just so you know, we did vet other manufacturers, and they can't stand up to it.
Right.
Yeah.
You want something that'll last the 20 plus, right? Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
When you do the math on that on a per year basis, the Seagrave is hands down beats you because of the longevity.
Right. When we're saving lives, I don't know if we
Yeah.
worry about that too much either. Right. Okay,
So
so,
I think we want to hold this, right, Han? We want to hold this to come back with,
Right.
on the fire budget, if that's okay.
No, that's fine.
Chief
So-
wanted to come back anyway. Yeah, that's my request, anyway.
So we need a motion to table or
You
just?
can just take no motion, we can just put it on
Okay.
future meeting, maybe the next. meeting.
Okay, so we'll table the rest of it.
This
You
is
can
it.
come back quickly the
Yeah,
next time.
right,
That's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
This is for the pumpers.
Right.
No, this is for the budget.
Okay, so the,
We'll be more specific with the deputy
Right.
chief at that point.
We'll
I
just
mean,
pull
Right,
that.
I
that's
think
fine.
those numbers need to be solidified.
Emergency management.
Yeah, so, okay, so Kevin, you want to start on that? The last one is the emergency management, number 19?
Well, let's let Chief Sullivan leave, right?
Oh, excuse-
Am I
I'm sorry.
done?
You can stay. Yeah, because you know what, Chief, I think we need to just bring back some more specific numbers with the deputy chief and then think more about EMS. We've done the whole budget, and so it would just be a really quick revisit.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm
Yeah.
just wondering if I wasn't sure what was the story with the regular budget.
I don't think did anyone have any questions? I thought it looked pretty good.
Okay,
I think-
that's fine.
It was detailed, it was, yeah, no.
I think you've explained the overtime, obviously, I mean, Kevin, it's
Yeah.
midway through, we're at 300,000, so we're definitely going to eclipse that, so, but I think, Chief, you explained the circumstances that created that.
Yeah, it
So
was
it's
definitely
more
an
of an anomaly.
extraordinary year, yeah.
Right.
Right.
No, the write-up is thorough, so that's fine.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, so emergency management, number 19.
Last budget is the emergency management budget. We have Tom Walsh, the emergency management director here. We're requesting level funding for next year, fiscal 2020. Main expenses within this budget, under contractual services, is a $10,000 line item, which is used for the Emergency Operations Center, which is at the Public Safety Building. These funds are used to service and upgrade and maintain the equipment in the control center. There's a $16,000 line item for the notification system, which is used to telephone residents in case of emergency. Total budget request is $73,000.
And I think like Ian and I said, I think we should move forward with this level funded for the next year.
Any other questions, comments on emergency management? Have we discussed that enough?
I just think with the understanding that
Right.
FY 2021, it's gonna be
gonna
really
be relooked at.
strictly evaluated,
Yep.
given the potential
But-
for deputy
and
chief.
also, Tom, I've talked to a lot of the fire personnel, and they have such great things to say about what you've done already.
Thank you.
And I think we're in better position than we were in a year ago, with best practices, so thank you very much for
Thank you.
everything you have done for this.
Mary,
Yeah, just to harp on it, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you've done, like quick highlights, but the grant money you've brought in, and Chief Sullivan and Chief Smith were talking about it. We'd love to hear about it.
Well, we've had some grant come in. I have a small one that I'll put into effect for a community emergency response team. That we'll start, hopefully do some training within the next month and a half. And what it does is be a volunteer group that if we had a catastrophe where all the first responders weren't able to come, we would activate these teams and they would work until first responders were free to do that. Is that going to really happen in town? I would say probably not, but it would be a good thing for our people to be trained at. They could help us out as volunteers and other functions that we have, like the 4th of July parade, the Italian festival, and and the holiday stroll. So it'd be more that people get involved with the town, and they're a part of it. And then be some things back, you give caps and shirts and that type of thing. But it's also, it's pretty good training. It's about 20-hour class that they get in there, and they learn, you do learn what you're supposed to do during an emergency, besides to save yourself and to help your neighbors, and then go out and do it. So that's part of one structure. And we get the MPG grant, which this year I used to buy the fire department, the ballistic helmets, and the vest to go into, we're developing the Asher program, which is NFPA 3000. Now that thing is coming down from the feds. And what happened was, all the studies that are being done on all of these shootings that are taking place, whether it's school, nightclub, wherever it is, they've found that even though you'll see the cause of death will say gunshot wound, a lot of these people are bleeding out. So what they're trying to do now is we develop a program where we have both fire, police, and EMS converge on the scene, and then as the police go to the hot zone, we'll have another law enforcement branch and a rescue task force team go in, triage these people, treat them, remove them from the scene, get them in from a warm zone into a cold zone, and then get them out and try to treat them as quick as we can. So we'd like to have the police get in within 2 to 5 minutes of an actual report, and then the rescue task force team behind it. So I've been developing the plans for that, and I just sent an SOG over, a standard operating guideline, into the fire department to take a look at. If they like it, tweak it, to adopt it. And that training, I had asked both the chiefs to ask for a little more money in their budgets for overtime, so that we get this training developed, get it going, so that any situation, we'll have the people out there, everybody respond quickly and in fashion, be no chaos. They'll get into an area. Now look at, I mean, we got the hope for the best, but we have to prepare for the worst. The town's not immune to a mass shooting. We've already had one in the past 20 years. So we have to prepare. This is a big thing coming down from the feds. And eventually, they'll be kicking in money for training for all this at all times. They'll be coming in, I'd say within the next year, you'll see that the next fiscal year, starting probably October 1st, when the feds start their thing, you'll see more money rolling into that. So those are part of the things I'm working on. I assisted with the fire at the church, brought in the extra equipment for the town, so we had that thing. And I'm working on, as Mr. Mayor was spoken about, the reimbursement for the snow that we had on last year. It looks like it's significant, and hopefully we'll get that done in the next couple of days. That'll be put in there. But the reimbursement takes a few months for that. Now, I've worked on, so I've sat with the schools on school safety. So I've looked at each branch. My job actually is kind of easy, because all I worry about is the safety of the people in this community. So each step, what do we have next, what's going on, and that's how it's driven. So whatever we can do, on my end, and I have a network of it, and I had 10 years in Malden, I did it, so I have the people in FEMA and NEMA that I can rely on. When we need the equipment, I just went to Malden today, I need a couple of lighting things, bang, they're up here, So I mean, those are the type of things that cooperation and that, that kind of effort that you have from everybody. It just works. The town, ends up being a lot better, equipped. And that's part of the thing now is the training that we have now is equipping all the people that we're trying to get trained. And then we're doing that. The chief is acquiring more equipment on their end, on the EMS side, as far as the medical, on that Asher program like I had spoken about.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Always prepared. I like it. Thank
Do we need a motion to approve?
Yes.
Yep. I move that we approve the emergency management budget as presented.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? 7-0.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
If I just want to say one thing,
Sure.
we also improved the EOC, the public safety building. I had them, we redid all electronics in there. And so that's all up to snuff. We put a significant amount of money in. So it's all state-of-the-art equipment that's in now, and now in the public safety building.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
waiting too for 2 hours. Okay. Okay, so next, D, donation, to accept and expend it, or a gift or gifts to the library from various donors with thanks.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, 7-0. Okay, next, E, School Building Authority Statement of Interest. First, we have the accelerated repairs on the Walton roof.
You want me to make it quick, and I think there are
Steve.
some questions.
Sure, no, please
I
step up.
apologize, yeah, I know you guys received the actual SOIs today. And these are for the accelerated program, which is for, I don't want to use the words extraordinary, but they are kind of extraordinary repairs that you go into the SBA, so they're,
Right.
you know, we have to prioritize. The school department has prioritized Greenwood over the existing area of the Walton roof. That was their call. And basically, this gets us into the queue to see if they're going to allow us into the program. We will be looking at these in capital anyway, because they're things that we need to be done at some point. The final plans are something that you would go through with the SBA, so this is kind of getting you into the queue. I do have, after questions, and if we so decide, that an actual vote that I need to read into the record for the SBA. Somewhat unusual. Normally, this would go to the school committee first. Because of the schedule and because these are due on February 15th, this is how it came, so I'm here to answer any of your questions.
Right, so I just brought up to Steve, I thought we were doing it backwards,
Yeah,
but
we are.
Okay.
We are.
So questions, Julie?
And just kind of in terms of the process, I think for the high school one, if we do get into the same
Right, yeah, that's-
situation, I
yeah.
don't really, I
No.
wouldn't be comfortable doing it this way
Yeah,
again.
I have made that very clear that that's
Thank you,
something
I know
that, that's due, I think we all made that very clear.
Right.
That's due in March or April, so, yeah,
I think it's April 12th.
yeah, so,
Yeah, I think
yes.
we're gonna need
Absolutely.
sufficient time to go through it,
A-
and
as-
maybe
as
even a
will
joint
I.
meeting.
Yeah, and maybe,
Okay.
absolutely, I agree 100%.
So kind of just my, well, I guess I have two just questions about this. So just looking at the MSBA website, and when I was reading through it, it has the district priority, and you rightly said that the school has prioritized the Greenwood over the Walton, which I think is the correct approach. But my question is, and I can't find an answer to it, by prioritizing the Greenwood, are we not prioritizing the high school? And when I read, this says districts must
Right.
identify and select one priority SOI among all SOIs submitted by the district. And I am very concerned that this will.
I'm going to say, Steve Mayo, the answer is no, because this is in the accelerated program,
Can
repair
we just
program.
clarify that with the MSBA?
Yeah,
Because I am very uncomfortable with this taking priority over the high school.
it is a different pool of money, so.
I realize that, but if
yeah.
you read this, it
No,
does
no,
not say that.
I understand that.
So, yeah, that is really my major thing. My other thing is that this accelerated program really came out of a green building program, and it's a lot about energy efficiency, and we don't have anything in here about the roof being set for solar, which I brought up at our joint meeting.
Right, I think that's something that we need to work on. You and I are gonna go to Salem.
Yep,
on a
and I
field
know
trip.
we've talked about
Yeah.
it, and I know
I'm not
you're
so
working at it,
sure
but I want to
that
make sure the
that
school
would- yes,
understands that.
Absolutely, yep.
Thank you.
Ed?
Well, I mean, I think to address the concern about the high school remaining the top priority, Steve, we can just
Yeah.
vote on that contingent upon the fact that
Right.
it is, it would not knock the high school out of our future consideration, so I think that's an easy fix for that, right?
Yeah,
And then you
right.
can, then you'll get the answer, then we'll just go
Right.
forward.
Exactly, and I believe that we asked Jack McCarthy that same question at the MSBA, so, but I will clarify that. Yeah.
I believe you are correct.
Yeah.
I think that's the case, too. Okay, any other,
I
yes?
guess then, shall we move on this motion?
Steve has to read, do you have to read something special?
Yes,
Is that for both, Steve, or just for one?
yeah, I'll read it, I'm gonna read it once, and then I'm gonna say that we did it twice. Is that okay with you? Subject to.
'Cause no one's listening or watching.
As stated, yeah. We're having convened in an open meeting on February 11th, prior to the closing date, the Wakefield Town Council of Wakefield, Mass. In accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the MSBA the statement of interest form dated February 15th for the Walton Elementary School located at 18 Davidson Road, Wakefield, Mass., and for the Greenwood Elementary School located at 1030 Main Street, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories which an applicant must be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in future roof replacement for both. Further voted that submitting the statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or approval of the application of the award or a grant or any other funding commitment from the MSBA, or commits the Wakefield School District filing an application for funding with the MSBA. So this just gets in the queue, and you'd have to take the next step. So if someone would move that with the contingency that was
So
mentioned.
I'll make a motion then that we move forward with this, with the caveat that it not compromise our ability to pursue the high school funding for this year.
Seconds.
Is that sufficient, Tom?
I think what you want to say in this round.
I mean, in this round, I should say.
Just that the high school is the highest, I wouldn't,
Bump the high school out of the.
out of top
highest
priority,
we
that's
should-
my
yeah.
point.
Yeah, we should take no action that would bump the high school out as the
The
highest,
top priority.
top priority.
Yes.
All in favor? All opposed?
Okay.
So that's 7-0.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions, Sue, and again, I apologize the lateness that you all got this.
So just a little addendum and to echo what was said, is that the school being our priority, I hope there's a timeline of us getting that proposal, potentially having a joint meeting that maybe should be scheduled tomorrow, so it's on all our calendars. I think that last joint meeting was really successful, and I think for us to have a conversation about environmental issues and everyone at the table. So I talked to Steve earlier, I think it's I'm not okay with us doing this before school committee. I'm actually not okay with school committee or someone from the superintendent's office not being here to talk us through this either. And I don't know how things are done in the past, but I think going forward, this is something that we're doing in collaboration with the school committee and the schools, that somebody should have been here. They should have been part of the agenda as we discuss this.
Or they
So-
should have been here just to be here too. They don't even have to be part of the agenda.
No, they should have, right, I think
Right.
we have other folks come and present to us, and this is something we're
Absolutely.
doing together. It would have actually been nice to ask them questions, that we had on reading this. And I get it's the first round, but I think we have an opportunity, as we all say, that the school is our priority, about how we're going forward and doing things differently, going forward, so that everyone, can get their questions answered.
Can I just ask, like, as
Yes.
a point of order, that,
Sure.
we voted on this already. So I think that sort of dialogue, while important, should be part of the discussion before we vote, and not commentary after we vote, as a general practice. I don't think that's, that's a point of order. If there's discussion of that sort, and it's perfectly valid discussion, let's have it in the discussion period, and let's not vote on it, and then offer personal commentaries, because I don't think that that's how we should be, making decisions. So I would just ask going forward that we just adhere to that process, which has been
Makes sense.
longstanding.
Well, I disagree with you. All the time, we would take votes, and then you would vote absolutely in favor or against something, and just have a conversation that didn't impact how you're gonna vote. So I don't know that, I would not call what Maureen said as personal commentary. I think her point was jumping off of, moving forward, let's have a joint meeting with the school committee, right, on the high school, and make sure we get that high school, the high school paperwork early. I don't know that it had anything to do with the Greenwood or the Walton.
Well, I think it had to do with the vote specifically, because we were talking about not having school representatives here, for example, not feeling comfortable having voted. If those were your concerns, Marion, and I respect those concerns, let's have them before the vote, because the vote may have been different as a result.
Those weren't my concerns. So it was what Ann said, so I said, I'm hoping going forward that we change the process. This is the way the process has been done. That's fine, we voted on it today. I have read the SOIs, I'm great, we talked about what our priorities are. We're talking about in the future, the high school, all of us have said that's a priority. We've talked about having a joint meeting. Let's schedule a joint meeting so it's on the calendar. The proposal needs to be done by April. April's really soon.
Yeah.
We need to start scheduling it, and we need to have a conversation with the school committee and with the superintendent and his team about that proposal. I have no problem with the vote today. I'm actually discussing future votes and future conversations, but
Okay. All right.
I will schedule that tomorrow.
thank you.
Right, because if we flash back to SOI with the high school, I think that unfortunately they were chasing Steve for 5 hours before the deadline, so that's certainly duly noted. That shouldn't happen. That's where a lot of errors take place on boilerplates. That's where we bring information forward that's from prior years that wasn't updated. There's a lot of things that made us look a little shaky in what we presented, so that's from being rushed, I think, too. So that's very true. Okay. So liquor license permits. So liquor license application for Wakefield, Linfield Chamber of Commerce. Any,
I move we approve the liquor license for the Blossoms. I believe this is for the Blossoms. On April
27th.
27th. So moved.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstaining.
Oh, abstaining,
I had
okay,
my
so,
cousin, his name on the first cousin,
all right,
so
okay, so, 6 to 1 with an abstention. 6-0. Okay.
Tony, you abstain?
yes. One of-
Okay, so,
First cousin's on the name, the application, so just to.
okay, approval of minutes. So regular board minutes, possible vote to approve the January 28th, 2019 regular board minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. So the next board meeting is February 25th, 2019, at 7 PM here at the WCAT studio. Matters not anticipated by the chairperson within 48 hours of meeting. Julie?
I'll just start by saying it sounds like snow's on its way, so good luck to the DPW, and let's all
Right.
make their lives a little easier.
Okay, Ed, thank you, Julie.
We had a meeting scheduled for the downtown revitalization. It was a forum for tomorrow night at the Galvin cafeteria. That's actually been postponed due to the pending weather, so we actually have that rescheduled for the 19th, so it would be a week from tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock at the Galvin cafeteria. I hope everyone can come out. We had some really good dialogue going on a couple weeks back with a lot of different stakeholders within the community. I think we're making good headway, but there are no preconceived notions about what the end result will look like. It's all based upon community input, so I'd encourage you to come out. Thank you.
That's at the cafeteria, right?
That's right, the Galvin, right, the Galvin cafeteria.
I would echo Ed's comments on that. The first meeting I went to was incredibly concrete and informative, and the ideas that were put forth that you could actually see was exciting, and I don't think we've seen that in many years, to have the vision of the downtown look and to think about how we execute that. So I would really, if people want to be a part of that, to show up on the 19th. A lot of improvements we're thinking about coming in the next several months, one of them being maybe Blatt's softball field. I know Julie and I know it well. Our daughters have played there and tripped over the ruts, and it's not a field that is, should support a varsity sport in our town. So I know we're really looking at to improve that and make it come up to code, so watch for that.
Okay. Maureen?
We had the police chief Smith here for so long, and the one thing that he didn't say today was the Wakefield Police Department is holding RAD self-defense classes for women for Mondays in March. And so 6 to 9 at night, they're great, open to people beyond Wakefield, women beyond Wakefield. So if you're interested, contact the police department.
Excellent. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have two items. Seeing that Sherry is a stickler to detail, I didn't quite make the submittal of a couple of items Thursday. She actually sent them out while I was talking to Steve, and she hit that magic button and sent.
Too late.
So I have two items that I would like to present for consideration. One is I would like to have a request by the WCP to be on the agenda for the February 25th meeting. They're trying to schedule the 2019 season, and they would like to have 4 dates secured for the upcoming year. The first one's April 13th. Second one would be August 24th, October 5th, and December 7th. So in order for us to schedule meetings and make sure that they prepare for the upcoming season, securing the dates would be crucial instead of working on it. So we'd like to present this to you for part of
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A. Thank you. For the to be put on the agenda for the 25th.
Sure.
Can you send that electronically as well?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
My second item was that I've had a couple of people contact me, and I've witnessed it firsthand. We all know that currently the tall spire is on Chestnut Street behind the Savings Bank. If any of you tried to get down here when the tall spire was off of Lafayette Street, you know that between 11:30 and 12:30, you were never going to find a parking space to come to Town Hall. Parents were all there picking up their children. That's happening now on Chestnut Street, and it's causing a bottleneck to a degree that I would like to request that the TAC looks at it and see if there's a remedy or some sort of solution where there's not a bottleneck now coming eastbound down Chestnut Street when there's no parking on the northbound side of Chestnut Street allowed at all currently. You just voted on it. So right now, we're just enforcing what's already there. There is no parking on the same side as Tall Spire, yet there's dozens of cars there trying to pick up their kids. So it just creates a much narrower street for two-way traffic. So whether or not you move them up a little bit more, I don't know. That's why we have the TAC. So I'd like to request that the TAC at least looks into it and see if they can come up with a recommendation back to this board.
Sure, sounds good.
Thank you. And that's all I have at this point.
Okay, Tony.
We approved the liquor license tonight for the Blossoms at the BB, which is one of the premier nights in Wakefield. It's a great fundraiser. It sells out every year. So I would just advise people, if they want to go and really contribute to one of Wakefield's gems, and that's the library, to purchase the ticket and purchase it early.
Online too, right? Purchase it online.
Online as well? Yes, correct.
Okay, Tom.
I look forward to passing out food at Blossoms.
Oh, yes. Tom, you do a great job too.
You can bid on my auction item too if you want.
Excellent.
Nice auction item for food.
Steve.
Very quickly, and a lot of people have been waiting for this date. The Massachusetts Department of Transportation will be holding its 25% design hearing for the Rail to Trail. Hooray,
Wow.
finally.
Okay.
On March 9th at 6 p.m. at the Linfield Middle School, this being the Linfield-Wakefield line.
Because there's so much support in Linfield.
Because,
for it.
well, that's probably why they're going there.
One extra vote, right?
March 9th?
March 9th,
It's a Saturday?
March 19th.
Okay.
Oh,
I had the 1 and 9
Catch,
there.
Julie.
what time is
Gonna
it,
put it
Steve?
right on the
It's March
calendar.
6
19th,
p.m.
6
Okay.
p.m. And where is it again, Steve? Just,
At the middle school in Linfield.
Linfield Middle School.
March 19th.
March 19th.
Yes, March 19th. I had 3/19 in the,
Oh, that's all right.
I can't read my own writing.
Thank God Julie was here.
Thank God.
Okay.
And one thing, while you're putting that in your schedule,
Right.
I received, and we receive this every year from the Mass Municipal Association, a request for a contest for our 8th grade students. And our 8th grade students basically write an essay, and they say, if I were mayor for the day, if I were town council for the day, this is what I would do. And shared it with the school department. They are going to partake in it, and there will be hopefully a session where all of the 8th graders will come and pepper me with their ideas and their hopes and their dreams, and it's a fabulous day. I will let you know when that occurs and invite any of you all there, because it is wonderful to hear their unjaded and unbridled enthusiasm, and it's a lot of fun. So that'll be coming up in the next month or so. So I'll let you know when that is. It's a lot of fun.
I'll have to reach out to some of my 8th grade.
And that's it. Ask them, absolutely. And
Okay.
that's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayo. It was a great night tonight, very lively, very informative, and very productive. I have nothing else. So, Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Paul Beechey. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Ian, Paul Beechey is back.
I know.